Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Los Angeles City Council for today, Wednesday, August 15th. The year is 2001. Meeting is now coming to order. City Council meetings can be viewed also from home on Channel 35, LA City View, or via webcast from the city's homepage, or heard via council phone. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Bernson, Galanter, Garcetti, Hahn, Holden, Miskowski, Pacheco, Perry, Reyes, Ridley Thomas, Wax, Weiss, Zine, Padilla. 11 members present in the quorum, Mr. President.
First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
Ms. Hahn moves. Mr. Garcetti seconds.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Holden moves, and Mr. Ridley Thomas seconds.
Before beginning the regular agenda, Mr. President, there are several items to continue. Item number 4, applicant consents to continuance to September 7th.
Members request to continue item number 4 without objection.
Item number 5 also has a request, the applicant requests continuance to September 5th.
Colleagues request to continue item number 5, also without objection. Item 5 is continued.
Item number 8, a request from Building and Safety to receive and file that item.
Colleagues request to receive and file item number 8. Without objection, item 8 is received and filed.
Also, a request on item number 11 to continue that matter to September 5th and also to correct the assessment to $128,540.
Colleagues, a technical amendment to adjust the assessment amount, and without objection, we'll continue that item as well.
Also, on item number 41, a request to continue that to Friday, August 17th.
Members request to continue item 41 without objection.
And a request on item number 42G, which is one of the closed session items from Mr. Weiss to continue that matter to September 5th.
Request to continue item 41G.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, it's 42G.
42G. Without objection, item 42G is continued.
Next items, Mr. President, there are confirmations of city officials on the agenda. Items 15 through 19 are confirmations to the Board of Police Commissioners. Items 18 and 19 reports are being submitted, and also on number 18, a motion is required inasmuch as that's being submitted without recommendation.
Okay, colleagues, once again, we have a number of commissioner nominees before us for confirmation today. Public hearing has been held on the commission appointments in committee. We do have cards submitted on item 17, but it will require a motion from the floor to reopen the public hearing. If I can call forward at this time, all 5 commissioners to the table in front of the members, while we pull out a 5th chair. And colleagues, again, as we did last Friday and as we've done yesterday, this is our opportunity to make comments or ask questions of the commission nominees, either individually or as a group. Before us, colleagues, are nominees to the Police Commission. Any members wishing to speak? The chair recognizes Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome, nominees. It's nice to see you here today. A question that I have, I think throughout different levels of the department, at some points, people have pointed out to, both from the outside and inside, wanting to make sure that there is a uniform policy in terms of complaints that are made by civilians. And I just wanted to run an idea by you and get your feedback on the idea of having some sort of civilian at the division level, civilian management of the complaint process, something that would free up some of the time that management spends dealing with complaints while we're paying them to do policing, and at the same time giving people a little bit more faith in the idea of complaints being taken in by an impartial body. So that would either be in the intake or some part of the process itself being handled by civilians at the station level.
One at a time?
Uno por uno.
Who's the brave one?
¿Quién es el...?
On first blush, I think
would be something that would be well to look at, because we do have a lot of frivolous complaints. And if we're able to wash those out, that would make a big difference in the officer's time. So I think it was able to do nothing but that. That could be quite a time saving for the department. So on first blush, without having thought it all the way through, I would think it would be well worth looking at.
To add to that, while we want to take each citizen's complaint very seriously, as Mr. Bachman indicated, there are some complaints that are I don't want to use the word frivolous, but some anecdotes that we've heard about individuals who are mentally ill that make some claims, and it consumes an enormous amount of supervisors' times to investigate the complaints. So we do need some standards. But as far as at the field level, if we can create access points for intake and some type of preliminary review, I think that is something that we should look at.
I'd like to echo some of the responses of the previous police commissioners and add to the point that all complaints should be taken seriously, but that there ought to be a system that can distinguish between the types of complaints that you have, those which are of a nature that a police officer may not have been polite versus those that imply misconduct or other type of activity. So I think that may be helpful, provided that there's some uniformity in the standards that are used. Because again, you want accountability, but you want accountability in an informed, logical way.
Well, I would also echo that, but on a broader scale, I would say there's probably a lot of opportunities for civilians to be replacing what an officer is doing. And on a broader scale also, I would say the discipline system, which I think is an issue that needs to be looked at by the Commission on the impact on morale, needs to be looked at in a much broader way, and how it's impacting not only morale, but recruitment and also retention in the department.
An overwhelming majority of comments that I've heard from a couple of ride-alongs that I've done and from a couple of roll calls that I've attended is the fact that the disciplinary system is not applied uniformly. I think the Commission has to take a very close look as to how we're handling complaints, if it has to do with the use of force or if it has to do, for example, in Rampart, there was a complaint about an officer being too physically ugly to be patrolling. And these two complaints are being put up through the same chain, and it's not fair to the community, because the same amount of resources and the same amount of time is being devoted to both these complaints, when in fact if you do have an officer who is exceedingly using his force and is violating civil rights, that complaint should take priority over somebody's physical appearance. So we do have to find a way to be able to discriminate between complaints that are unfounded and complaints that have merit to them. However, in no instance must be quashed the ability of the community to come forward with a complaint. We have to make sure that the doors are open, the community can come forward and voice their complaint.
Thank you. Members, we had a temporary glitch on our computer system here, so if you're wishing to speak, please press your button again. I'll go next to the Chair of the Public Safety Committee, Ms. Misikowski.
President, members of the Council, like other committees, we have held intensive question meetings with these commissioners, allowing each of them to be asked some very serious questions, because, members of the Council, I believe this is our most important commission at this time in the city's history. The forces that are arrayed out there, sort of in the constellation, are some of the strongest forces that I think we, the city, are encountering. I know as I've seen my colleagues here look at the cases we get in executive session on claims and settlement with issues affecting the police department, whether it's a use of force claim and what officers are doing and our desire to stand by our officers, in the face of seeing a lot of civil complaints, the issues of employment in the police department and what's going on there. And this commission, as this council, is going to face some of the most formidable, and has faced some of the most formidable personalities, including the chief of police, including the inspector general, including the mayor's office, and including members of this council. All of those forces are going to be thrown at you, as well as the body politic of police officers who you are in charge of, and the body politic of the community, which sometimes is in support, sometimes is in diametric opposition. It was with that question and those issues in a lot of detail that we asked these members their life experiences, their community background, their experience in law enforcement, or their experience managing and running and governing other institutions, which might be comparable, although I think there's none that's comparable that I can think of. The committee did recommend the confirmation of 4 of the appointees. On the 5th appointee, and as Ms. Salcedo, the committee split. There was one recommendation for her confirmation, and I voted not to confirm her. And it's not because I don't think she's an outstanding person who I think can serve the community and be a part of the city body politic. But I did not feel that at this point, given her background or her ability to really have been tested and battle-scarred with some of those kind of institutional battles that one is going to have to fight, and those strong personalities that one is going to have to grapple with, that this was the appropriate commission. I noticed yesterday Mr. Holden asked, when we were looking at the harbor commissioners and the water and power commissioners, have you served on other commissions? Have you had other experience? And all of them were able to answer yes. And I think that the other commissions can be a place where one can grow and learn institutional testing, learn the governance of the city, learn the independence that one needs to stand up to those forces that are out there. And that was why I made that recommendation. On the whole, members of the council, this commission is going to be tested. It's going to be tested, and those of us who've known commissioners in the past who've been the equivalent of perhaps Supreme Court justices or really experienced people, they've been seasoned veterans have been exhausted by this commission, disappointed by how little they can accomplish. So this group, and I would join in having my colleagues today ask some of the tough questions about discipline and morale, which may be at counterpoint. The role of the chief and the inspector general, which just today we see other articles in the papers saying that there's a conflict there again. The other article today about the settlement of the case. We have difficult issues that this group is going to have to grapple with. It's, I think, a full-time, all-consuming job, and I appreciate their willingness to serve, and my recommendation stands.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to echo what my colleague, Ms. Misikowski, said about the outstanding qualities of one of our nominees, Ms. Salcedo, but I'd like to state my reasons to my colleagues for my decision today with respect to my vote for her nomination. She is worthy of praise for her desire to do public service, and I want to thank her for taking the time to meet with me on 2 occasions to discuss this nomination before we had the committee hearing earlier this week. But it's important for my colleagues to know that I'm voting against confirmation of Ms. Salcedo because I believe that at this early stage in her career, she's not yet qualified to serve on what I believe is perhaps the most important appointive law enforcement position in this city. She doesn't have professional or academic experience in government, public policy, public service, law enforcement, or in the criminal justice system. She doesn't have experience in legal issues relevant to the work of the police commission. She doesn't have managerial experience, and her private sector experience, which I imagine will blossom into a worthwhile career, is at present limited to the area of real estate law. And I think she would be quite candid with all of you, as she was with me when we've spoken about this, in indicating that her interest in police issues is a newfound one, and that this hasn't been an issue that she has followed closely over the past several years in Los Angeles. I believe, colleagues, that at this time in our city's history, we need 5 police commissioners who from day one are ready, willing, and able to stand up to the chief, to the command staff, to the rank and file, to the press, to the LA Times, to the mayor, and to all of us whenever it is appropriate. You need substantial public or private sector experience to be able to do this, I believe. And I think that a fresh perspective on these issues is valuable, but when freshness arises from this being one's first venture into the public sector or into this area, I don't think it's appropriate for the Police Commission at this time. And so that's why I will reluctantly but necessarily vote against this nominee.
Mr. Reyes.
Señor Reyes.
Couple of points, council members,
Puntos
Mr. President.
del Consejo Presidente.
When we talk about experience, when we talk about understanding, knowledge of a community,
de la comunidad.
I rise to support Ms. Salcedo.
soportar a la señora Salcedo. Señorita
Most of us don't understand what it means to grow up in a neighborhood when there are 147 persons per acre when the city average is 12 to 14. The pressures that come from both institutions, from, and I'll say it, racism, when it comes to institutional neglect, and to be able to survive those kinds of environments, and to be at this point now ready to provide the kind of insight and sensitivity that we need at the commission level, I think is more paramount today, more than ever. The issue of age, I believe, is something that could be understood. If you look amongst us here in the council, I think we have some precedent in terms of what age means and relevant to managing and controlling positions of responsibility. I've had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Salcedo on several occasions. Her attentiveness, her understanding of the issues in the city is a fresh perspective we need at the commission level. Rampart is in my district. The situation there in terms of the prostitution, the neglect of those bodies that should be controlling our quality of life is evident. The need for resources are tantamount. And this can probably be said in several pockets throughout the city. But we do need that kind of understanding, that kind of analysis at the commission level. And if we were to understand her success, her ability to produce, her ability to perform at all ranges throughout her life, to get to this point is something that's very outstanding. When we talk about diversity, we need it. When we talk about understandings of different areas, different neighborhoods in the city, we need that perspective. I stand in support of Ms. Salcedo. I'm hoping the rest of my colleagues can see through the types of issues that we will be facing in the near future.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Clearly, I agree with Councilwoman Ms. Sikowski, who says this is probably one of the more critical commissions in place in the city of Los Angeles. Many of us who are newly elected found it to be one of the major discussions that we had out on the campaign trail. Everything from a lack of faith in our police department, the restoration in the truest form of the senior lead officer program, which most communities are still very unhappy with and still feel like it's been more talk than it has been action. I've heard from the rank and file police officers who feel like the morale problem is critical. As you all know, retention, recruitment is critical. On the City Charter Commission for 2 years, we heard many of these same complaints, and we felt an overwhelming desire by the public to have more civilian oversight of our department and to have some real accountability, so once and for all, we can restore the faith of the people of Los Angeles back into what could be one of the greatest police departments in the country. Many of us are troubled. Some of the most troubling things so far as a council member have been in our closed sessions where we begin settling lawsuits for millions of dollars for what seems to be retaliation by this department against some of its own members. So these are critical issues. Complaints from citizens have to be honored and taken seriously. I would like this commission to look into a policy which I've just recently heard about where people are put on a chronic complainer list. So when they call to make a complaint, they are known as a chronic complainer. If those of us on the city council had those kinds of lists in our office, we probably wouldn't be taking any more phone calls. I think that's an injustice to people. And let me just speak to Ms. Salcedo and to say that colleagues, experience comes in all different forms. And as many of us, we would be very hypocritical on this council to bring up age and youth and inexperience. Some of the council members sitting here today barely had a profession before they became city council members. We've elected the youngest member to our presidency in the history of the council. And may I remind you that John Ferraro became a police commissioner at the age of 26, and I believe at that time his experience was something in the insurance business. And he went on to have a very important place in the history of Los Angeles. Let me just say that a woman and a minority have experience that many people will never have at whatever age they come to. And for Sylvia, to at this point in her life, have really broken through a lot of barriers and a lot of obstacles, become a very fine lawyer, says a lot. And you only have to look at her biography to see that the experience she has is deep and is critical. And frankly, with all due respect, we've had commissioners with experience and age. And frankly, our department is still, in my opinion, in a mess. So I look forward to having a different perspective, a different point of view, and representing, in my opinion, a part of our society which sometimes goes very unrepresented.
Thank you.
So I will be voting in support of all 5 commissioners.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. The LAPD is close and dear to my heart since I spent 33 years of my life there. And reading the papers and watching television, we know there's a crisis within the LAPD. And echoing the comments of my fellow council members, not only a crisis with the community in the LAPD, but a crisis within the LAPD management and the employees of the LAPD. And just yesterday, this council, through great pains, approved a settlement of over $3 million to a civilian employee of the police department. Not a person being beaten in the street, not a person being abused by a rogue officer, but by management. Management that didn't do what was proper. Now, we turn to the police commission to manage the police department. You are the policymakers. You are the heads of the police department. I know Commissioner Bachmann. I know his dedication. I know his commitment. I know his reputation with the Police Commission. And he's been a leader with the Police Commission and had to deal with some very sad times with some fellow commissioners. My concern as a taxpayer, resident, council member, is your insight, your knowledge, and your ability to change the mentality of not the dedicated, hardworking police officers, but of management that doesn't seem to get the picture. And when we look at the relationship, if you want to call it a relationship, and I refer to it as the Jerry Springer relationship between management and the rank and file with the Police Protective League, it's confrontational constantly. And all you got to do is read the papers about it. A constant barrage back and forth. I'd like to know what you will do to bring forth the parties, the rank and file and management, to serve the people of the city who are paying taxes for public safety and they're not receiving it. And I'd like each of everybody to respond to that, please. What you will do to bring those forces together, which are diametrically opposed at this time.
My most recent past experience has been head of the federal CRS agency, which moves into communities when there's conflicts between the police and communities. And I have seen over the past 4 years where we move in to initially restore the calm and then begin working through the issues that divide and create those conflicts. One tenet on how we work was to bring all stakeholders to the table. I think that while we have a number of priorities here in restoring professionalism and integrity and trust and confidence in the community and improving morale in the force, there are a number of issues, but I am concerned about process. How can we get people in the same room to work through and agreeing on some universal principles about reforming and improving the police department, and then sit in there and work through the differences on policies and practices. I've seen it happen across this country. I approach this task with optimism and pledge that we would seek to be collaborative and involve all the parties, and then utilize the authorities that have been invested in the Police Commission as managers, as heads of the department, to create that leverage, to create that expectation of cooperation and collaboration.
Well, I concur with that. I just want to also point out that last night I was at a roll call, and speaking to the rank and file, and they were very open and very honest, which I thought was great. First of all, I think all of us need to spend more time doing that. Second of all, it is clear that the animosity between the rank and file and management and the chief is pretty thick. And from my experience being at DWP and running that organization, from my experience in business running my own company, unless employees on a daily basis go to work and feel good about going to work and trust management, you're never going to be able to effectively run a company. The job of this board is to very clearly require management to be accountable for their actions. And I don't know what's happened in the past, and I'm not here to judge what's happened in the past, but certain things need to be done, and this board needs to be very strong. So part of it is bringing people together and trying to resolve conflict. The other part of it may be that you're never going to resolve it, and you may need to change management, you may need to change organization, you may need to change process. Clearly, our goal, my goal, is to make sure that what we're doing on a daily basis is increasing the morale. And I don't know how you increase morale if they don't believe in their upper management or they don't believe in their commission. And I was frankly amazed last night on the comments that were coming out of rank and file, and it does need to get resolved. I wish I knew all the answers. I don't. It's a big organization. It's not going to be easy to change overnight, but there's going to need to be some fairly direct actions and swift actions in order to get this department back in shape.
We do have some history that can guide us as to what some of the problems are and how to resolve them. We can start with the recommendations from the Christopher Commission. We also have a consent decree that was worked on that laid out some very specific remedies. I think that when you look at, for example, Special Order Number 40, since 1979 has been policy for the city, yet we see that there have been violations of that in the past. I think one of the things that we have to do as a commission
hacer como
is be
comisión
very clear
es
on
muy
what our
claro
policies
en lo
are,
que son nuestras
very clear
políticas,
on
muy
what the
claro en lo
guidelines
que
are,
son
and make
las
certain
reglas y
that
estar seguro
we
de
follow
que
the
seguimos las
recommendations that have been provided
recomendaciones
for
que
us
se
in
han
the
prohibido
past.
para nosotros en el pasado.
I feel that every
Yo siento
piece
que
of this
toda
department has to come together and has to work
pedazo de
as a
este,
team. And
tiene
as
que
a
llegar
team, the
como
ultimate
equipo
goal
y
has to be
nuestra
public safety.
meta debe
Public
ser
safety has to be
seguridad del
paramount.
público, debe ser paramount.
Not the politics,
No es política,
not ego.
no
Public
ego,
safety has to be paramount. And
la
until we
seguridad pública
understand
debe
that
ser
and we
paramount, y
understand
hasta
that our
que entendamos eso,
responsibility
que
is to the
nuestra
community,
responsabilidad es para
that
la
is not
comunidad,
going to happen. But
eso no va a
public safety
pasar,
is
la seguridad
paramount,
del-
and that should be
del
guiding the
público
department.
es paramount y debe ser gobernado por el
As we know,
departamento.
the police
Nosotros
department
sabemos que el departamento
oftentimes is
policial
likened to a
es
paramilitary organization. And as such, we have a structure in place that sometimes does not lend itself to curing the problems you brought up here. It is important, however, that we do have the respect and we take the time to hear one another so that we can acknowledge the best way to provide the leadership in the police department that this city is entitled to. And I would be committed to try to achieve that.
Mr. Pacheco.
Señor Pacheco.
Mr. President,
Señor
colleagues,
presidente, colegas.
I am very disappointed in some of the statements I've heard from my colleagues about Ms. Salcedo, especially when you talk about experience and being in the early stage of your career,
en su carrera, a este punto de su
standing up to the
carrera,
chief.
es
When I hear people talk
cuando
about
usted
standing
habla
up to the
para el
chief,
jefe,
I hear
estándose
a
para el
message to the
jefe.
chief
Yo oigo un
that we're going to
mensaje
ask
al
the
jefe
commission
que
to
vamos
do
a pedir a la
something,
comisión a hacer algo.
and that we're going to ask them to do our job when it comes to stand up to the chief, and I don't like that.
Cuando se enfrenten al
When
jefe.
someone says
Cuando alguien dice
that she hasn't been
que ella
tested
no ha sido probada,
or the scars
o
of life
las-
experience are not on
las
her.
cicatrices de
Let me
la
tell you
experiencia de vida,
something.
déjeme decirles
Anytime
algo.
you
Cualquier
see
momento que
a
ustedes
successful
ven
minority,
a una minoría
you see a person who's
exitosa,
been
ven a una
tested,
persona que ha sido
okay?
probada,
You see someone
una
who has the
persona
scars
que
of
tiene
life
las
experience.
cicatrices
When you
de la
have
vida,
someone who has
cuando
started
tiene
their
alguien que ha
primary
empezado
education
su educación
not knowing English
sin
well,
conocer inglés
because
bien,
Spanish is their
porque
first
el
language
español
at
es su
home like
primer
I
idioma en
did,
casa como
like
yo,
she did,
y como
that's
ella
your
hizo,
first test.
ese es su primer
When you
prueba.
look at the fact
Cuando
that
ven el hecho de que
50% of our
50%
kids
de
are not
nuestros
graduating from high
niños no
school,
se gradúan de high school,
that's another
esa
test.
es
When you
otra
look at the
prueba.
fact that
Cuando ven el hecho
another
de que
50% of
otros
those who
50%
start
de esos
college
que
drop
empiezan el
out,
colegio se salen,
there's another test.
esa es otra
When you look at the
prueba.
fact that
Cuando
less
ven
than
el hecho de que menos de
5% of the minority
5% de la
population
población
has a
minoría
post-bachelor degree,
que no
she
tienen
passed the bar. You know how many
diploma de
non-minorities are not passing the
¿saben
bar
cuántos no
today?
están pasando
There's another
ser
test. So
abogados?
if you
La
want
prueba, si tienen
tests
pruebas
and life experience and
y
scars,
experiencias
you
de
walk
cicatrices
in
de
the
vida,
shoes of a
caminen
minority
sus
person in
zapatos de
this
una
country,
persona
and you will
minoría
see
en este país,
that
y
they
ustedes
have
van a
life
ver que
experience
ya
that you
tienen
may not
experiencia de
appreciate
vida que a lo
because you
mejor
don't
ustedes no
share that
aprecian porque
experience,
no
but
comparten
it
esa
is
experiencia,
scarred
pero
and
es-
tested.
ya está
She has the
cicatrizada
courage, the
y
tenacity,
probado. Ya
as
tiene
all minorities who are
necesidad, como
successful,
todas
to
las
get through this
minorías,
system.
para llegar
And
a
we
este
know about the
sistema, y
institutional
sabemos
racism that
que hay
Ed brought
racismo
up.
en la
And we
policía.
know about the people
Y
who
sabemos
whisper
de
on
la gente
campus
que
that the only reason you're there is because of affirmative action.
Pues
But the
baja cuando
equalizer,
acerca de la gente,
something
pero
she was able to do
el
was
ecualizador
pass
de lo
the
que ella pudo
bar
hacer es pasar la
without
barra
any
de
affirmative
abogados,
action, without any other sort of
ninguna
crutch,
otra
without any other handicap being given to her. She passed the
ella
bar,
pasó la
she's
barra,
been
ella ha
tested.
sido
I'm
aprobada.
supporting her
Yo
and
la
hope
estoy
you all
soportando y
support her.
espero que
And
todos la
think
soporten.
about what you
Y
mean by
piensen
life
de lo que
experience the
quieren
next
decir
time you
con la
say
experiencia
tested and
de
scarred
vida,
when you look at a
cuando
person
dicen
of
que
color.
prueba cicatrices de vida cuando ven la carrera de una persona.
Mr. Holden.
Señor Holden,
Hey, Nick, you trying to convince me?
¿estás tratando de convencerme?
Well, Mr. Zion,
Señor Sain,
you were my friend when you were a
usted es
police
mi amigo,
officer,
usted
You're my friend now.
usted es mi amigo,
but you are management
pero
now.
usted es management
And the things
ahora.
that you saw was
Y
wrong
todo
when
lo que
you
usted
thought was
vio
wrong when you were a police officer.
cuando fui de
You have the
policía,
influence
fue
to try
influenciado
and take care of it.
y trató de
Article in the Daily News saying there's too much belly aching, you know what I mean. I'll show that to you.
Yo le he enseñado eso.
But they're the ones that belly ache, and
Ellos
now
son
you
los
in
que
management, so don't belly ache for them.
management,
They'll do it
entonces,
for themselves.
Ellos mismos lo hacen.
Let me just say this.
Déjeme decirle esto.
I don't know what good or
Yo no sé
bad,
lo que es
how we're
bueno o
going to vote
malo
on this,
y cómo
because
van a votar
some
en
say
esto,
you're not
porque él dice
qualified,
que
and
no está
some say you're
calificado,
too
y otros
old,
dicen que
some
está
say you're
muy
too
viejo,
young.
otro que está muy joven
Fact of the matter is that
de
there's
hecho,
something I can argue either side of the issue.
yo no sé en cualquiera de los dos lados de la cuestión.
You take this guy Caruso.
Tomen este
Caruso
señor
was
Caruso,
rejected and
fue
denied confirmation for the Harbor Commission. Am I right, sir?
A la Comisión de Harbor.
Just say it out loud so
Nomás
everybody
dígalo
hears.
fuerte para que todos lo oigan.
That's right. They wouldn't vote for him.
No votaron por
Does
él.
that make him not be qualified for this
Eso no
position?
lo
I don't
hizo.
think so.
No
Mr.
calificado para esta
Bachman,
comisión, señor
you
Bachman.
had that problem over there. What
Usted
that
tiene ese
the police
problema
station
con la
was?
estación de
Where all
policía.
this stuff started? Rampart.
Rampart.
You were commissioner there, right,
Usted
Mr.
fue
Bachman?
comisionado ahí, ¿no?
Are we going to blame you for that?
Lo vamos a
I don't
culpar
think
por
so.
eso, ¿no?
Mr. Zion was a police officer. We're going to blame anybody. We blame him.
Policía porque lo van a culpar a él.
No, the chief didn't shoot those people.
No, no le disparó a esas gentes.
Oh, come on. You know what I mean? Come on, Dennis. Come on. Put the blame where it belongs. Then, of course, we have another one. We already covered him already. Ochi.
Tenemos otro, Ochi.
You know, you left us.
Usted nos dejó.
You were doing pretty good here in the Criminal
Estaba
Justice Department
haciendo
section.
en la sección de
And you
de
could have stayed
justicia,
on, but you went on back to
pero se puede haber
Washington.
quedado, pero se regresó a
And when the
Washington.
president
Cuando
didn't
el
run for re-election,
presidente no corrió para
now you're
reelección,
back here.
ahora está otra
Does
vez
that make
aquí.
you qualified? You got a lot of
Eso lo hace
experience.
calificado, tiene
You
mucha
know, you're willing to do
experiencia.
this job, you're too,
Usted
maybe
quiere
you're
hacer
too
ese trabajo, no
qualified.
está muy
You could do
calificado.
some other things.
El amor tiene otras cosas.
But the mayor nominated you.
El presidente
Then you
municipal
have
nominó.
this David
Tenemos
Cunningham.
El señor David Cunningham.
And I was going to vote against David Cunningham just because his name is David Cunningham.
Y votar nomás porque su nombre es David Cunningham.
But then I looked down and saw it was
Y luego
David
vi
Cunningham the third,
Cunningham
not
el
the
tercero,
second.
no el segundo.
Because the second has never
El
supported me in
segundo nunca
anything.
me ha soportado
And this
a mí
Miss
en ninguna cosa. Y esa
Saucedo,
señorita Saucedo,
she came to my office the
ella
other
vino a
day.
mi oficina el otro
And
día.
I've interviewed a lot of people, but I
Yo
was
entrevisté a
especially
mucha
tough
gente
on
y
her.
esta fui duro
I
con
want to know
ella.
what she made of. And then Mike Hernandez, you all know, came into my office. He said, she's
Ella
from
vino a mi
Pico
oficina,
Union.
es
And that
de
told
la
the whole
unión
story.
y eso tuvo-
I mean, the
fue
Pico
todo esto.
Union
La unión
is
de la
adjacent to
Pico
my
está
district.
junta a
We
mi
blockade the
distrito
whole area.
y bloquea toda el área,
Those K-rails are there. Am I right?
¿no es cierto?
Which means that we could catch
Eso
the
quiere decir
criminal
que
before they
podemos
come into my
probarla.
district, or vice versa.
Claramente antes de que venga a mi
Am I right,
distrito,
Mr. Zion?
viceversa, ¿no es cierto, señor?
That's what the K-rails are for. And you grew up out of that
Usted
environment.
creció desde medio ambiente.
I think you got to be pretty tough.
Yo creo que debe ser
I think
bastante
you have the
fuerte.
battle scars to
Debe
prove
tener
it.
muchas cicatrices ya para
Maybe
probar.
not what you
A
did
lo
there
mejor
because
lo
you're
que hizo
not
usted ahí,
in the community. You're
porque
in
no
the
estuvo en
community,
la
but you're not a
comunidad,
part of it.
no
But you
fue
came out
parte
of
de
it.
él, pero salió de ahí.
And therefore,
Y por eso
you can relate to the
puede
persons who have the problems like the ones that had
con las
Rampart.
personas como los que corren en
Some were
Rampart.
guilty, some were not.
Algunos son culpables,
The fact of the matter is
otros
that
no.
we need that
La
kind of
cosa es que
experience
necesitamos esa clase de
at the
experiencia
table.
en la mesa.
We need somebody who can relate to that individual at the table. And someone
Relacione con
who's
alguien,
not at the table will
esa
have the
persona en la
confidence
mesa y que tenga la
that someone at the
confidencia
table
y que cuando está en la
understand their
mesa
plight in
entienda
life.
todo lo de
You know,
su
I was tough
vista
on
en
you,
la
wasn't I?
vida.
Say
Yo
yes.
fui duro con ella, ¿no es cierto?
Say it in the mic.
Dígalo en el micrófono.
Yes, you were, Councilman.
Nah, well, that's what I was trying to get out of you. I was trying to find out what you were made
Estoy
of.
recordando.
And you didn't break and you didn't bend. You responded to
Usted
me.
me respondió.
I could be mean
Yo
sometimes, mean
puedo
to the
ser
judge
bastante
yesterday.
duro con el juez,
He said
con
you should be a
jueces.
judge. That's what he told me after I
Diciendo que
finished
debe
with
ser
him.
juez.
So I am the judge today. In any
Tú vas a
case,
ser el
I'm going
juez
to
hoy
judge
y
you
voy a juzgar la
qualified
hora
because
calificada
Mayor
porque
Hahn wants you,
la-
each of 5 of you. And Mayor
esa
Hahn is
persona
the guy who
lo
signed off the
quiere y
consent
porque
decree.
no-
Mayor Hahn will be
el
responsible
presidente municipal
in the
puede ser
end
responsable al
for
final
your performance and
por
whether or
lo
not
que
you do
usted
the
haga y
job
que usted
that's
se
compatible with what's
hace o no
written
hace el trabajo
and agreed on
comparable
between the
y
federal
usted- y
government
tiene la
and the
parte del
city council,
gobierno
city of Los
federal y el
Angeles.
consejo
You have to
San
carry
Juan.
that charge.
Usted tiene la
You
fuerza.
know, sometimes I do some
A
things,
veces yo hago
sometimes I
cosas,
don't.
a
This I
veces
do.
no, pero esta sí la hago.
Mr. Wax.
Señor Wax.
This is difficult, Mr.
Este
President,
es
because these are
difícil,
really, I
señor
think,
presidente,
five,
porque creo que
all 5 very good people.
son 5 buenas personas.
And yet,
Y
because I've seen very
he
good
visto
people
muy buena
come along for
gente
30 years,
venir por 30 años
and things
y
are getting
cosas
perhaps worse than
están
better.
empeorando
I'm not
a lo mejor
optimistic
y no optimista
that these 5 people
con
are
estas
going
5
to really
personas
change things. And
que van a
that's
cambiar
what saddens
cosas.
me.
Eso es lo
For
que me
those of us who
entristece
have
para
supported this
nosotros que hemos
department
mantenido este
and who believe in
departamento
the critical
y que
importance
creemos en la
of law
importancia
enforcement
principal del
and the
departamento de
partnership between
policía y
people
el
and the police department
departamento
to see the
de
state in
policía
which
para
it's
ver el
now
estadio que está, el estado que está ahora.
has really been painful.
es
as it has been
doloroso
to many
como ha sido
people.
para mucha gente.
But reform just doesn't come that easily, and you know it. Bert knows it, he's said it. And it doesn't usually come from within, and it doesn't usually come voluntarily. There's too much stacked up against it. The attitude of don't tell us, we know what's best. The refusal to share information to even people in positions of being the head of the department. The holding of officers by the neck so that they don't perhaps speak up and sometimes get punished for it when they do. These all lead against reform. And it isn't so much the qualifications to have reform, it's going to be the determination to make reform. And that's tough. It has to start at the top from the people who appoint the people. It has to apply to them. It has to apply to us. I don't see anything necessarily in either the person who has appointed the people or the people indicating that they're going to somehow do something different than those good people who've come before. And if they don't do something different, all the qualifications in the world aren't going to make a difference. I hope I'm wrong, because it's in all of our interests to be wrong. I hope that we are finally maybe at a point in the city where there's a broad enough consensus among wide enough ranges of people that reform has to come about, and it doesn't have to come about at the expense of the department, that it's in the department's own best interest to have reform, and that you don't have to choose between law enforcement and reform. They go hand in hand. In fact, they're inextricably tied together. And I hope maybe that this commission will be different, but I don't know what it will take to do that. I don't see that right yet, so I'm a little disappointed. But I certainly am not going to single out Ms. Saucedo from among this group, because I think the comments about her background qualifying her from one perspective, every bit as valid. You know, you don't need 5 civil rights attorneys being on a police commission. You know, you need people who've been in the streets, you need people who've been arrested, you know, people whose children have been killed, you know, you need people who have a life experience to bring to this, but collectively, so that they reflect all of the experiences of the people of the city. You know, people who've been victims of crime, people who've been robbed, people who've been raped. You need all the people. But beyond the experience, you need a commitment to stand up. Even if it means getting fired from your job, you've got to stand up and insist and demand upon being the head of this department, because you are the head of this department. And if you don't do it, who else will? And if we don't work with you, then we're equally to blame. But it is not going to change just simply by having good names. It's going to have change by a commitment to bringing about change and doing it in a way that provides for public safety and reform. That's in everyone's best interest, and that's what people want. That's what people have a right to expect. And I just hope that as I leave, I'm coming back in 4 years. I hope you did a fabulous job, because I've got a stake in it too. We all do. And we all feel part of this. So I think Bert identified the real problem, and it is the culture from within, and it has to be dealt with. And
thank you.
I just don't know that it's going to happen, but let's hope it will.
Mr. Burnson.
Well, Joel, you said a lot about what I wanted to say, but I'm going to say some of it anyway. 4 of these commissioners I've known for a number of years. I think they're all outstanding choices, with the possible exception of the name situation with Mr. Cunningham because of his parentage. But that's the only drawback. I had to serve with his father for a number of years, and I know the background. Anyway. But the 4 of you, I mean, I've seen all of you in action through the years in various different activities, and I think you're all very, very extremely capable of dealing with the immense problem that we have. But I'm going to talk about Ms. Salcido, and I think that she said the most important thing of any of you. She said the number 1 thing is public safety. We shouldn't forget that. The number 1 thing is public safety. Our department has diverse problems now. We have management problems with the officers. We have a community thing which has problems with the department. We have a department that in some cases is afraid to exercise their duty because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them. And that reflects in public safety. You've got a tough job ahead of you. I don't envy you. But I think that you have the capability of dealing with it. I think Ms. Salcido, particularly, who I don't know, comes from a background that's important to have. Excuse me now, would you please? Comes from a background now that is important to have as part of this group. I grew up in Boyle Heights. I came out of the same environment. I know what it's like. And you have to have this environment and this experience as part of a group that's going to deal with a group of people that are dealing with this every single day. And I think the mayor made extremely wise choices in this case. I don't agree that this is the most important commission. I think it's the most controversial. They're all important because they all deal with the activities of our city, and all of them are important. But I have confidence that these individuals are going to do their best. And we can't expect miracles. You know, some of us have been here for a lot of years. Joel, you've been here for longer than me, a lot longer. I've been here for 22 years, over 22 years. And we still have some of the same problems we've been trying to solve. But we don't stop working at it. We keep working at it. Sometimes it takes a little time. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your willingness to serve and stick your head into the oven, so to speak, of the fire. But I have confidence that you have the ability and the willingness to do it, and I wish you luck, and I'm going to support all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are two individuals on the panel that I wanted to highlight because of the problems that are unique to the 9th Council District. The first one is David Cunningham III, and the second individual is Rose Ochi. David has a stellar reputation as an attorney specializing in an eminent domain and other such practices, and Rose has long history with Mayor Bradley and working on finding funding for criminal programs designed to affect communities in a positive way. And also, she's always been an active participant and member of the ethnic coalition, so her record of reaching out to all communities is well established. And for David, you may be familiar with the extensive environmental problems in the 9th Council District, environmental polluters, owners, property owners who have no regard for the quality of life for residents of the 9th, including illegal tire dumping, putting particulates in the air with the scrap metal recyclers. And I'd just like for you to make a comment on how you can incorporate that into your commission work. And as for Rose, Rose has such a great background in finding money to fund various programs, and I'd like for you to comment on whether you could foresee opportunities to take, for example, asset forfeiture money and help me fill a void in some of my parks where there's high levels of criminal activity by assisting me and being creative in the budget and getting additional outreach programs and rangers to help make the parks more available for families and children.
Councilman Holden. I am back, but I have created a lot of ties and relationships in Washington, both Department of Justice, you mentioned asset forfeiture. I also was at the White House Drug Policy Office. And so much of the relationships that I have forged over the years, also in Sacramento, working with the Office of Criminal Justice Planning. I'm someone who's very interested in analyzing, designing, reforming, improving the criminal justice system, and the thrust that I have been pushing is a very community-oriented approach. I just want to mention the last thing I did for the Reardon administration before I left for Washington was to bring in that first $3 million to create the community infrastructure for the community advisory groups. And so this is a major priority, finding ways and resources to truly move towards a problem-oriented approach in policing.
And Councilwoman Perry, first off, thank you very much for your comments. And I do want to answer your first question, but I'd like to address what I've heard as a continuing comment from the city council members, and a few, and that is whether or not we can change what has occurred with LAPD and whether or not we can actually alter some of the culture. And I think we have, all of us in this room and all of the citizens, we have a unique opportunity now. One of the things that I've heard repeatedly is that there's a loss in the number of police officers, retention is important, and recruitment is important. But one of the ways that you do change a culture is through recruiting new people. And I think one of the issues that we need to focus on very clearly is our recruitment policy and our recruitment effort. Because I think through that, for example, in bringing in new people, that you are going to impact that culture and that eventually it will change. It's another reason why having someone with youthful points of view can be very beneficial to us as a body and ultimately to making that change. In response to what we can do with respect to environmental polluters, there are a number of different agencies that work on that. I do know that we have some permitting authority. Environmental pollution is very much an issue that's important to me, and to the extent that the police commission can impact that as a public safety issue, that will be a top priority for me as well.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. First, Councilmember Hahn spoke of some members of this body's inexperience, and I just want to say that even though there was a short career as a tax attorney, I think that Councilmember Joel Wax turned out to be an extraordinary member, and I praise him for that. I'm also glad to hear he's coming back in 4 years, and I know that he will have a job waiting for him with Councilmember Holden. And one last bit of advice for Mr. Cunningham. Sometimes folks, misunderstand fathers, and they usually don't vote against you, and they don't vote against you, so don't worry about that. I do want to get back to a point that Councilmember Wax said. I think this is really a question of will, and that is the most important thing that I think that I can stress. Because a number of things have been said on the pro-police side already that I would have echoed, I won't say them again, in terms of the recruitment, the morale. But I do think that we're dancing around the kind of stick that we need to have as well, and the will that we need to have to implement the sort of reform that a lot of people whose voices are not present here today are not here to articulate. I'm going to end this up by asking a couple questions, and I'd like to hold the balance of my time to ask those questions at the end. But before that, I think that professionalism from our police department demands that we praise what is good, but that we also hit straight on the head what is wrong. And when we talk a lot about the culture, and Mr. Cunningham brought that up as well, it is not just a culture of how discipline happens internally. With all respect to Councilmember Zine, there are those issues, and I will also champion those for rank-and-file officers within the department, helping the department to become a stronger department. But there are also issues that are outside of that department. And the biggest disconnect we have, I think, between our population and our police is between young people and our police department. There are some great efforts. Captain Mike Downing in Hollywood has an incredible police activities league, which I really recommend that you all look at, where there are 3 full-time officers that just work with youth in the community. We raise money to be able to do that, so that when there is something that happens with a young person, it isn't just a suspected perp, it's somebody that they might have a relationship with. But changing that gap between our young people and our police department, I think, is our biggest challenge, and some of our other populations as well. So I'm going to ask some of the kind of stick questions about it, and I don't think it's necessarily any one person, and I don't think it's the fault necessarily always of individuals in the police department, but it is a culture, and a culture that is not just about how the internal procedures happen, but how interaction happens with the general public. The first question I'd like to ask, and anybody can answer it, you don't all have to, but please feel free to, before your commissioners, because you probably can't comment on it later today. How do you feel that force was handled by LAPD during the Democratic National Convention? And what could be improved?
With regards to the force that was used at the DNC, I'm not personally familiar with what actually happened. I know what I've read from the newspaper articles, so me commenting on that would be too early for me to do that, and I feel it would be inappropriate. I want to make sure that I have all the data in front of me. I want to make sure that I have all the research in front of me. I want to make sure that I am fully briefed on the issue, and I want to make sure that all my questions have been answered before I make that quasi-judicial decision, whether it was in policy or not. So I think for me to answer that, that would be a little too early.
I think it was handled exceedingly well. I think by and large that the officers did an outstanding job and it was well planned. There were a couple of minor incidences, and I say minor because you have a lot of involvement with a lot of officers in a lot of different places that you look at and say, I'd like to have that addressed just a little bit differently, and perhaps the way we handle a situation with either an individual or a small group, but nothing there that was extreme. It's just I feel there were better ways to have handled a couple of minor incidents.
Incidentes menores.
I concur as a resident looking at it, not as a potential commissioner on the police department. I think it was handled exceedingly well with the events that went on, and I think the department should be complimented for the way they did handle it.
Because the Democratic National Convention followed the Republican Convention in Philadelphia, where there was a number of incidents resulting in rioting and violence and destruction of property, I believe the department did a fine job because we did not have such incidents. I'm very familiar with the planning process that reached out to not only community organizations, Department of Justice Community Relations Service. We were involved in some of the meetings and the plannings, and we were very much involved in negotiating exit routes and trying to diffuse situations where there were civil disobedience occurring in front of the Rampart Station and the like. I think that we can debrief and we can look at what we've done, and I want to be cautious in commenting because I understand that there is a lawsuit pending, but I think with every major action, we can take a look at how we deployed and what we lessons learned and how we might do things differently.
I think my colleagues have sufficiently briefed you on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. A second question that I would ask is, when you look at the Sheriff's Department, there's been a considerable amount of outreach, especially when faced with criticism, specifically in West Hollywood, in terms of reaching out to the gay and lesbian community. I was wondering if you could comment at all on what the LAPD could do to better have outreach within that community in particular. And I know there's concern as well about unfair crackdowns on certain bars because they happen to be gay bars, as well as versus bars that don't have as much of a gay clientele.
I know that there's a section in the consent decree that talks about reaching out to different communities, and whether it's the gay and lesbian community, whether it's the community of color, whether it's the poor community, whether it's the young community, there has to be a sensitivity in the department towards that community, and that can only be achieved by by forming a partnership with the different communities in the LAPD and understanding that this partnership can help both grow and can definitely point the LAPD into directions as to how to decrease crime and how to increase public safety in the different neighborhoods, regardless of what type of neighborhood it is.
I believe that our city has a number of ordinances that are anti-discriminatory as to sexual orientation. I think that is important for the police department and the police commission to echo those points of view and policies.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti.
Okay, so just one last quick comment. Again, I would just say, it really is a question of will here. And I know that already you're in the same mode that we're in, which is that you have to be politique about these things. But the reform that will come, if you have the will behind whatever, however you want to articulate these things, if you have that will behind it, and if we share that will here, that is the only way that we will see the source of reform. Otherwise, we'll be asking ourselves time and time again in this, we'll be talking about the Christopher Commission 20 years from now that we still need to implement it, and we cannot do that in this city. Thank you.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Ridley Thomas.
Mr. President, members of the council, To the prospective police commissioners, there is much discussion that has been entertained about the issue of morale of the officers in this department. One of the ways to address that has been advanced in the form of a compressed work schedule. This concept, while not novel, is one that has caused quite a bit of concern and/or discussion. There is a study that has been requested by this body so that we are adequately informed as to the merits and/or the demerits of altering current deployment policies, practices, and procedures. A couple of questions that I would like you to direct your attention to. The first of which is, conceptually, do you see this as an appropriate or sufficient response to the question of police morale? And secondly, the question would be, is it your view that the study that has been requested and that is currently underway, that is being paid for by the city, should be completed before your disposing of the matter itself in terms of a vote to alter the work schedules and the like? And if so, we'd be interested in hearing what your views are, yea or nay, as to the disposition of the matter of compressed work schedule.
You guys can't do this at the commission meetings.
And you might direct your attention specifically to the issue of 312 as one example of a compressed work schedule.
I'll take a quick crack at it, Councilman. Based on the discussions I've had with police officers and what I've read, there's a lot of merit to 312, whether it's 312, 410. I think most of the rank and file, I'm sort of projecting here, would tell you that that's an option that they want to have. I think it will probably help in recruitment. It will most likely help in morale. And I think the overriding concern is whether or not there is a fatigue factor, whether there's more opportunities for people to be working multiple jobs, et cetera. What I learned last night after roll call and on a ride-along is that most of the officers on their schedule today have the opportunity, and many do have multiple jobs. And 312 isn't going to really affect that. And there's probably an argument that would tell you there's more of a fatigue factor today because of their schedule with some officers working multiple jobs. So that's a concern whether there's 312 or not. In terms of, information and whether or not this police commission should wait until the council study is done. There's been 2 studies, as you know. There's a lot of precedent out there. I always think that more information is better than less.
Whether your first question, whether a compressed work schedule is an appropriate response to the poor morale we are facing in the police force, I think it's one response. We need to look at the other issues, some of that have surfaced this morning about an adversarial management relations. There are a number of other issues that we need to address as well. But, this is not normal times. We're severely understaffed by, I believe, 1,000 under the budgeted level.
and that when we have a need to optimize our presence, for example, at the Democratic National Committee, I know we go to a compressed work schedule. So I have not had a briefing on this. I need more information before I can make a determination on where I stand on it. But I do believe we need to be open, and we also need to be very, very open to how we can stem the bleeding. Everyone says public safety is our #1 priority, and yet here we have good officers leaving the department and many expressing dissatisfaction and wanting to leave. And so we need to look at how can we be competitive with other jurisdictions that are luring them away with better pay, better working conditions.
I think the benefit overall is somewhat short-lived, except for those officers who may desire a benefit from a 312 personally, which I think are in the minority for a whole litany of reasons. And I'm talking about a large number, whether we're talking about safety, whether we're talking about community, whether we're talking about addressing crime when it happens and how you have the right number of officers there at the right time. I feel that 312 does not work well for the department. At the same time, I said a promise given should be a promise kept. And I think there is a promise out there that has been made. And if we're going to do it, I hope it's something that we can try to prove its value. And if not, try to get something that would be better. My own personal preference would be that the study be completed, because I think they may offer, hopefully, some different options that are available that I think in the end, if everyone would approach it with an open mind, might be something that the officers would find very acceptable and perhaps handle a lot of their desires, and at the same time work well for the citizens of the city.
Thank you.
I'm cautious about believing in quick fixes. And I think that the issue really is one of flexibility. I had an opportunity to have one of my first ride-alongs with some of the police officers last week, and over the past few weeks, I've also had an opportunity to meet with some of the employee organization leaders. And there's a diversity of opinion about what you'd refer to as 312, and that what maybe is better described as a flexible work schedule. The answer seems to be that there is a need for a flexible work schedule. What version is acceptable, I think, really is a question of what works. And I agree with you in the context that we do need to look at what has been tried, what can be tried here, and what the officers want. What does trouble me, quite frankly, with any flexible work schedule is the issue of fatigue. It seems that maybe for some of the younger officers, a 12-hour workday isn't a problem. For older officers, it may be. So I think that the implementation of a flexible work schedule needs to take into consideration that it may work for some officers, it may not work for others.
I echo all of my colleagues' concerns, but what I really want to take a close look at is as to how the community is going to feel, making sure that the residents of Los Angeles are feeling safe, making sure that response time is going to increase, making sure that we have enough officers patrolling our streets, making sure that the community and that the residents of Los Angeles feel safe. And that is a primary factor that I want to take a look at in examining 312 or any type of flexible work schedule.
Is it your sense that a compressed work schedule will heighten the sense of safety as it is perceived by the residents with whom you are most familiar?
It is my sense, by the two studies that I've read, it's my sense that they have been conducted by management. I think in order for us to get a good hand as to what the community feels, I think we have to go out there and we have to perhaps hold a neighborhood watch or perhaps hold a meeting at a community center and hear them voice their concerns, because ultimately they're the ones that will be affected by it.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may, the issue of the adversarial relationship between management and rank and file has been referenced with some degree of regularity. I wonder if there's a point at which it can be indexed as to how unusual this is or is not, or do we find that the back and forth between management and rank and file is typical of what we've seen over the last decade plus? I would just simply ask you to think of whoever the chief of police is, think of whoever the head of the Police Protective League is, and ask if that relationship is defined by harmony, collaboration, cooperation, or if in fact it is defined by tension, conflict, competing claims, and the like. And then think about what is significantly different now than then. It would seem to me that kind of reflection might prove itself to be instructive. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes.
Council President, council members, commissioners. In my first 45 days, I've had a town hall meeting, and I've had a get to meet the councilman session. The most pervasive complaint we had was prostitution along Olympic. And what I found is that by being there, we brought in city departments, department heads, personnel, and they were able to engage the community as far as what the issues were, and we got quick responses. My question to you as commissioners is, would you consider coming into Rampart and holding a commission meeting in the district, so that way you can get a perspective from the people that live there, and you can see for yourselves the rash of prostitution that is spreading in that area. And I'd like for you to give me a response. Would you consider having commission meetings in our districts and hopefully go into the areas where you see this pervasiveness of law breaking that is just out of control?
I would definitely consider it, and I would be a proponent, and I would bring it up to the commission. That is something that should be considered. I think perhaps maybe we can have the last meeting of the month at the different bureaus to make sure we have all the citizens, we have all the citizens voice their concerns, whether it's in the valley, whether it's in Rampart area, if it's in South Central, if it's in the harbor. I think it's essential for the commission to get a feel for what the residents are feeling, because ultimately they are the ones that are impacted by public safety.
One of the key issues with respect to reform seems to be the question of community policing. I know there's been great efforts at having a community policing activity board and community meetings. Certainly, we as members of the Police Commission ought to join in on that effort, and I think we should make a commitment to have meetings where we are accessible to the community to understand what their concerns are, and if that means going to them, then I'm certainly on board with that.
As you may well know, we've had meetings in the different council areas. I think, if anything, I'm rather disappointed because of the lack of interest in the public to attend those meetings. We've had as few as 3 people, and probably the high would be in the area of somewhere in the area of 150, 200, which was in Councilman Bernson's district. So I think if we're going to have meetings there, it would be well to work with the councilman from that area and make sure that the public is at least informed and has an opportunity to have as many people attend as possible. Because I think if you have very few people, you really don't gain much insight into what's happening in that specific community.
I would like to comment that should you come to Lincoln Heights and Cypress Park, we've had 3 killings in the past 4 to 5 weeks, one after the other. And I guarantee you, you would have a packed house. And you'd get our support to make sure that folks understand that if they don't report the crime, we won't know just how badly the situation is. So your presence there will also be a gesture by which we can inform community folks, educate them that they need to make that phone call, regardless of time and how many times they do it. We need to understand just how bad these areas are getting.
Ms. Misikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to compliment the council, first of all. This is the kind of question, the kind of debate, the kind of substance I think we should put our commissioners through, and that's, I think, been lacking in the past. I think Mr. Wax said it correctly. It's really, no one can guarantee that there will be a change, but we all need to follow up on the promises, and we need to be sure that the commissioners are tough enough, independent enough, and dogged enough to make a change in this department, which is, we have all sorts of indication and evidence that that's necessary. I would like to ask each of you to answer the question of how would you handle a situation where you felt you were being unfairly pressured to vote a certain way or to not put an item on the agenda and to not deal it. We've had that with senior lead officers. And in the past, there was a concern about how strongly the mayor's office, given the former administration, was really in control of the agenda day-to-day of the commission. So I know that some of these members, I've seen them handle pressure. I think Mr. Bachmann at one point resigned at a point. Mr. Caruso has had the choice of being appointed or not, and actually has resisted being appointed to this commission in the past as a consequence of pressure. But I would like to ask each of you to answer it. How would you handle what you felt was unfair pressure to vote or not vote in a certain manner?
As a commissioner, I feel it is my duty to remain independent of anybody that comes before the board, to remain independent of the chief, to remain independent of the inspector general, to remain independent of the union. And my ultimate responsibility is to the community as a civilian oversight. That is who I'm responsible to. I'm sure the pressures will be there, but my ultimate responsibility is to the community, and I must remain independent. And I will take a moment now to address something that I addressed on Monday about the Inspector General's office. I understand the Inspector General's role. I understand the role is very important. I understand the Inspector General is the investigatory arm of the Commission. I understand that he is privy to all the documents that the Commission has, and in fact, he can request for more, at which point I would expect the department to be fully cooperative. However, I do know that we're all human and we all have a viewpoint, and I'm cognizant of that. And because I am cognizant of that, I will keep the viewpoints in mind of the different people that approach me and the different people that approach the commission to be able to see through the viewpoints and be able to decipher the true facts before I make any conclusion or before I decide to put something on the agenda or to remove it. But it is my duty to remain independent, and I expect to do so.
Councilwoman, it's a good question, and I don't really know the right answer. What's that? Okay, I concur with my fellow. I think what you have to do is you be honest about it. And when pressure comes to bear, you have to be strong enough to resist it. And there may be times where you're going to agree with putting the item on the agenda, so it's not going to be a pressure situation. But we're independent. I come to this with absolutely no agenda. You're right, it's not a position I sought out. And so I don't come with it with any agenda other than to do what's best for the city. And that's going to be my attitude in serving my time on this board.
When Mayor Hahn approached me and asked me to serve on the police commission, one of the things that he pointed out is that we'd known each other for many years and that he respected my independence in the context of having seen me work with him in the city attorney's office, because our firm has represented the city in various issues. I can tell you that I will base my decisions first upon looking at the evidence, listening to the arguments, and then following my conscience. And in my practice, one of the things that you have to do frequently is to confront a client and point out that you hire attorneys for their independent judgment. So that is something that I've had experience with in the past, and I welcome the opportunity to do it with the Police Commission. And I assure you that I will follow my conscience.
How would I handle this situation? You know, when the mayor announced our appointment, he said he wants us to be independent. And this is the only way in which we are going to be successful. Independent from the command, independent from the rank and file, independent from city council. This does not mean we're not going to collaborate and discuss and try to work things out, but that we need to be unfettered in making our decisions. The people in the city of Los Angeles has imposed very strong powers for civilian oversight and place them in the police commission. And I accept this responsibility earnestly, and I commit to working in a very diligent and also independent fashion.
In the years that I've spent on the commission, I don't recall ever having any unfair pressure brought on me. If that should occur, where I felt that was happening, I'd first examine and see if there was something that I wasn't seeing in the other person's argument. In other words, is there a chance I'm not understanding fully what he's saying to me? And once I understand that, if I didn't, I would still vote the way that I feel I have to vote. And that's my conscience, that's the way I've done it, and that's the way I will always do it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Zine.
For my second and last time, thank you, Mr. President and colleagues, and I'll be quick with this. I want to thank you for your honesty, your candor, and your sacrifice. I know Commissioner Bachmann, many hours on his Tuesday meetings down at the Police Commission. It's a great sacrifice, and I know the sacrifice you're about to make, and hopefully you'll all be nominated for confirmation. One thing that I know you'll be reviewing, and we're anticipating the report on the matter that we resolved yesterday, accountability and responsibility on a $3.75 million lawsuit. I know that'll be coming before your commission. Also, the consent decree, the retention, selection of the chief of police, that's coming under your watch. So there's a lot of things that are going to be on the plate, in addition to the mundane routine activities you'll be performing as commissioners. And I would just encourage you, as commissioners, to take advantage of the ride-alongs, because in my meetings with commissioners in the past, they've always said, we hear from this side, but we don't hear from that side unless we go out there and meet with the officers and the detectives. So I would encourage you to avail yourself of the ride-alongs throughout the city, because obviously, commissioners, you are available to do that, and to get a true perspective and true focus. And the bottom line is, the buck's going to stop with you. Yes, we're the city council, yes, we have the mayor, but when it comes to the department and the Christopher Commission, the consent decree, the federal monitors, the inspector general, the buck stops with you. And we'll be looking at you and making sure that that's done properly for the citizens of our great city. So my anticipation is you're going to be confirmed, but you have a full plate of activities to do, and my good wishes to you all.
Mr. Holden.
I just got to respond to you, Mr. Garcetti. Fact of the matter, Mr. Wax, there will be a place for you in 4 years. I'll welcome you with open arms. If you need me, I'll share. And Mr. Garcetti, when you grow old, when you're young, you kind of want to absorb everything for yourself. A guy named Rap Bunch told me that. Like a sponge. You get older and mature, you want to give back. And I'm sure you'll grow into that. At least thinking like that anyway. But I see we have at least 4 attorneys at the table. Mr. Bachmann, you're in the minority. But I know you're a good guy. I bought a car from you. And I got a good price, too. But I will say this, Mr. Zine, the time has come where we got to work with management within the police department. It's like the military. You had the regular army and you had the volunteer army. The regular army was the volunteer, the others were drafted. And we would say to the ones who were drafted, we didn't send for you, you volunteered. And I can say that for the men and women in blue. We didn't send for them, they volunteered. And they stay here because they like it, some of them. Some of them recognize the fact that when they go to some of these other departments that's recruiting them, it's like a family situation there, and they want to come back here. And you never talk about the ones who have left and decided that the grass is not green on the other side of the street, and they want to come back. We have to stop the belly aching. As Ms. Salcida says, public safety is the #1 priority. For those who don't want to provide it, hit the road, Jack. Simple as that. Now let me just say to the public, for those of you who are working, have jobs, do you work 3 days a week or do you work 5? Raise your hand, the ones who work 3 days a week. Raise your hand, the ones who work 5 days a week. 6 or more, 5 or more, 5 or more, 7. I can tell you, the public will not support a 3-day week work plan. Public safety is first. Will not support it. No matter what the commitment has been, no matter what the promise has been. Some promises would like to be kept, some you just can't. Fact of the matter is that the police chief cannot any longer be the target of the rank and file. Someone to throw darts at. The time has come and gone for that. Do your job. I've always supported the men and women in blue, and you know that. And I will never stop. But the fact of the matter is, when they're right, I'm on their side. Even though I've had some heat because of that. But when they're wrong, I'm obligated to tell them so. So I would say to you that we want to keep the valley a part of the city. And we have an editorial in today's Daily News, which says that put the 3-day-a-week plan on hold. They talked about all the problems that are associated with the likelihood of implementing a 3-day work plan. Put it on hold, they say, to the mayor and to the commissioners. Public safety is #1. I'm going to give each of you a copy of this editorial. I want you to think about it when the matter comes before you, because that's my top priority. Shootings in the community, trigger-happy individuals. How much money we paid for cops who are shooting when they were not in policy? Come on, Dennis, tell us sometime. There's two sides to this coin. Abuse. I mean, how many chiefs have the rank and file attacked? Gates on down. There's never been any peace and harmony. You know that. Management has always been the enemy in their eyes. But as I said before, we didn't send for them. They came on their own, and I closed in 2 seconds. I'll take this point of personal privilege to introduce your dad, Mr. Cunningham III, who's now with the former Councilman David Cunningham II. There he is. He's a friend, and if he were here today before us, I'll be voting for him.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Colleagues, that concludes the queue. Mr. Weiss?
Mr. President, I would move that we have a separate consideration of each of the nominees for our votes.
We will do just that. I've heard questions or concerns or a desire by at least 2 council members to vote no on at least one of the commissioners. So as opposed to voting on the confirmation of the commissioners all at once, we will take them one at a time. Madam Clerk, in the order in which they appear on the agenda, please.
Item number 15 is confirmation of Rick Caruso.
Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Mr. Caruso is confirmed.
Item number 16 is confirmation of Mr. Bachman.
Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Mr. Bachman is confirmed.
Item number 16 is confirmation of Rose Ochi. Excuse me, item number 17.
Please open the roll,
Ábrese la lista.
close the roll,
Ciérrese la lista.
tabulate the vote.
Tabúlese la
14 ayes.
Ms. Ochi is
14 sí.
confirmed.
Ms. Ochi
Item
está
number
confirmada.
18 is confirmation of
Asunto número
Sylvia
18,
Salcido, and that
confirmación de
also needs a
Salcido, y
motion
también tiene la
inasmuch as
moción
submitted without
que fue
recommendation.
sometida sin recomendación.
Ms. Galanter moves
Galanter
approval.
Mueve
Please open the
aprobación
roll,
por ábrese la lista.
close the roll,
Ciérrese la lista.
tabulate the vote.
Tabúlese el
12
voto.
ayes, 2
12
noes.
sí, 2 no.
Ms. Salcedo is
Salcedo
approved.
está aprobado.
And number 19
Y
is
número
confirmation
19,
of David S.
confirmación
Cunningham
de
III.
Cunningham,
The third, not the
el
second.
tercero, el segundo.
Please open the roll,
Ábrese la lista.
close the roll,
Ciérrese la lista.
tabulate the vote.
Tabúlese la
14
lista.
ayes.
14
Mr.
sí.
Cunningham
Señor
is confirmed.
Cunningham,
Congratulations to
confirmado.
all of you.
Felicitaciones a todos.
Let's send this item forthwith. Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Señor Willie Thomas,
Mr. President,
señor presidente.
we've had a long discussion. We had some observers in our audience, and I just want to take a moment to
Público,
acknowledge the Academy of Business Leadership students. The request came to us just a few days ago from the University of Southern California, who runs this academy. And this is a 7-week program. It's a summer session where students are introduced to the opportunities available to them in the business world. They have requirements of some consequence, and let me just say what they are. They create a business plan, and they manage a fictitious, I underscore fictitious, $100,000 stock portfolio. They engage in computer training, and they are provided all that they need in that regard. So why don't we have those students stand so we can acknowledge them and give them a big round of applause, will you? The students in the Business Academy. Wonderful, and we wish you the best of luck in your pursuit. Yeah, look at them, aspiring entrepreneurs and corporate leaders and all of the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas, and yes, welcome to all the students. Someday you'll have business before us. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise to introduce a very important group that's here with us today, and they thought they were going to be introduced and get to leave a lot earlier, but I actually think this was a very interesting debate, and I believe that they are probably glad that they were a part of this debate today. I would like to welcome and recognize the members of the Los Angeles Minority Business Opportunity Committee with their Executive Director, Diane Castaño-Solí. They are attending the first general LA-MBOC meeting of this administration, and this group plays an important role in identifying contracting and procurement opportunities for small, minority, and women-owned businesses. Welcome, and we're glad you're here today.
Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. President, colleagues, I also like to welcome Stephen Boykin. He's the representative from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and also with him is Maria Diacosta, Business Development Specialist from the United States Department of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today and participating with our minority businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Madam Clerk, next item.
On the regular agenda, Mr. President, item number 1 is an item notice for public hearing. It's a Planning Land Use Management Committee report to be submitted, and an ordinance first reading is included on that.
Thank you. Item number 1 is notice for public hearing. I do not have cards from members of the public wishing to speak on this item. We shall deem the public hearing open and closed. Any members wishing to speak on item number 1? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Item 1 is approved. Colleagues, just a brief announcement. We're sending all items forthwith today and Friday to expedite business being taken care of during the recess at the end of the month. Madam Clerk, next item.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 2 is a public hearing regarding a street lighting improvement district, and the council's action should be to open the hearing and continue the hearing and ordinance to September 5th.
Okay, once again, this item is noticed for public hearing. Seeing no requests from members of the public to speak on this item, public hearing is deemed opened and closed. Any members wishing to speak on item number 2? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, we are continuing this item.
Yes, Mr. President.
Next item, please.
Item number 3 is a street vacation in the Council District 12, and the council should hear the protests if there are any, and deny protests and instruct the city engineer to proceed with the street vacation.
Colleagues, item number 3 is now before us, also posted for public hearing. Seeing no requests from members of the public to testify on this matter, public hearing is deemed open and closed. Madam Clerk, we require a vote.
Yes, Mr. President.
Please open the roll. Please open the roll on item number 3. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved.
Next items, Mr. President, are items building and safety reports to confirm assessments, and the next items would be items 6 and 7, 9 and 10, and 12 and 13, and there is an amending motion on item number 13. Do you wish to call that one special, or take that with the same?
Let's call item 13 special for an amending motion, and item 14 special. We have public comment cards in item 14. So that leaves items 6 through 12, with the exceptions of 8 and 11, before us. Any members wishing to speak? These items are posted for public hearing as well. No further requests from members of the public to testify on these matters. Any specials? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Those items are approved. Next item.
Item number 13, do you wish to take that up now? It's called special, but it has an amending motion, and that's a written motion, if you wish.
Has that amending motion been distributed?
Yes, it has, Mr. President.
Colleagues, item number 13 has an amending motion before us. Without objection, we will adopt the amending motion. And Madam Clerk, please open the roll on item number 13 as amended. Open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Item number 13 as amended is now adopted. Next item, please.
Item number 14 has a card from the public. It's public hearing.
Let's call that special and come back to that.
Next items, Mr. President, items for which public hearings have been held, items 20 through 23.
Items 20 through 23 are before us. Public hearings have been held on these items. Any specials? Items 20 through 23.
21 special.
Mr. Reyes?
21 special.
Mr. Reyes calls 21 special. Any others? Mr. Holden calls 22 special. Items 20 and 23. Any other specials? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Items 20 and 23 are adopted. Next items.
Items for which public hearings have not been held, items 24 through 41.
Items 24 through 41 are now before us. Item 41 has been continued until Friday. I have no request from members of the public to speak on these items. Any specials? Mr. Ridley Thomas.
33 is amended only, Mr. President, and it can go forward as a technical amendment.
Has that amendment been distributed?
It has been.
I just have a point of information on 24.
Ms. Galanter.
I just need some advice on 24. I think, as it's listed on the agenda here, the motion is to sustain the veto, and typically, I believe, motions have come to us, veto motions have come in the other form, so that the motion was to override, and then those who did not wish to override voted no. So I just want advice from the attorney, so I make sure my vote comes out the way I want it to come out.
24 or 29?
That's 29, and I would like to call that special.
Let's call 29 special.
But I would also
Sorry, I
like
read
to,
the wrong item.
I would also like to call 24 special.
But can we answer my question now, and then we won't have to ask it again?
Madam City Attorney?
On 29?
29,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry.
On 29, you would vote, if you don't want to sustain the mayor's veto, then you would vote no.
Okay, so that even though this is backwards from the way I'm used to seeing it, there's no problem with that.
Because that was the committee.
Because it went to a committee. Typically, they don't go to a committee.
No, but this was the committee's
Committee chair's
recommendation.
But under council rules, is it normally done that way?
Normally, it doesn't go to committee.
This is contrary to council rules.
It was referred to committee by the council chair.
Can we have a ruling from the city attorney on this as to whether this is contrary to council rules?
A point of order, can we have that discussion when we call it special? I think there are going to be a number of items we're going to discuss on the matter.
Let's do that, and we'll clarify at that time whether it's consistent with council rules or just not customary, if that's the most appropriate terminology.
30 and 38.
30 and 38 called special by Mr. Garcetti. Any other specials? Any other specials? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, what remains before us?
Items 25 through 28, 31 and 32, 34 through 37, and 39 through and 40.
And item 33 as amended.
Yes, Mr. President.
Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Those items are adopted. Next item.
On the continued agenda, item number, Mr. President, items 42 and 44, the closed sessions, do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, let's hold closed session items on the desk.
The next item would be on the continued agenda, item number 44. And a new ordinance has been prepared by the city attorney.
Okay, item 44, we'll call that special. I will say, public hearing has not been held on this item. I do not have requests from members of the public to speak on it. We'll take members' comments at that time. Next item, please.
The item is called special. Item number 14 was called special inasmuch as there's a card from the public.
Colleagues, item number 14 is now before us. We will open the public hearing. The council calls forward Ms. Donnell Dadigan to be followed by Sheila Holencheck.
Good morning, members of City Council and the public. My name is Donnell Dadigan, and I'm the owner of the Max Factor Building in Hollywood, California. As you all know, this is a designated historic building, and for the last 5 years of ownership, which I've been very proud to be able to have, we have struggled through some very difficult times, but thanks to the Hollywood Entertainment District, the Business Improvement District, we have turned the corner as far as the economic trend is concerned with the current leasing market and the current popularity of Hollywood. After 5 long years of having a vacant building, I'm standing here in front of you to finally say I have a tenant in this building to go along with my dream, which is the Hollywood History Museum. And I must thank at this time the Hollywood Entertainment District for changing the economic trend and temperature in the Hollywood Boulevard area, where now more and more people, not only tourists, but locals alike, like to come and visit. And for this, the direct result is that I now have a 100% filled building with hopefully economic improvement included. As a result, I do support the Hollywood Entertainment District, the Business Improvement District in Hollywood, and I will hope that you will all think the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sheila Holencheck to be followed by Petra Dubuclet.
Good morning. My name is Sheila Holencheck, and I represent a building right at the northeast corner of Hollywood and Vine, 6253 Hollywood Boulevard. I work with Gilmore Associates. I am in support of the renewal of the Business Improvement District. However, in the interest of time, I'm going to defer my time to another property owner from the district as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Petra Dubuclet to be followed by Joel Fisher.
Good morning. I'm Pietra Dubaclay. I'm with Marengoff Equities. I'm also from Hollywood. We've owned 3 buildings in the Hollywood area. We've been in Hollywood since 1983, and we've seen many of the changes that have transpired, especially during the last 5 years of the bid. We do not think Hollywood would be in the situation that it is now. It's at the pinnacle of success, and with the renewal of the bid, we continue to hope for the continued revitalization of Hollywood. We urge your continued support, and we look for the continued renewal and success of the bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joel Fisher, to be followed by Karen Starr.
Mr. President, members of the council, that's a tough couple hours to have to follow with our business. I'm Joel Fisher from the Hollywood Palace, which has been around 70-some years and seen the war zones change of Hollywood. I'm also chair of the steering committee for the renewal of the bid. We appreciate your having us come back to continue the process. And this is a process that, at this stage, over 64% of the property owners of Hollywood have already voted to continue for another couple years. And as you heard last time, there are those who object for one reason or another to the efforts of the Hollywood Business Improvement District. Notwithstanding that, because of legislative reform and judicial events, we assure you that we attempt to accomplish the most we can for the largest number of our property owners on clear public policy grounds, and we urge your continued support for the Hollywood bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Karen Starr, to be followed by Samuel Gorin.
Hello, my name is Karen Starr, and I work for Tilley Investment Company. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate Services, and I'm representing Tilley Investment Company and the Carriage House Museum on Gower. I was informed that at a previous City Council meeting, someone commented that there were the owners on Gower were not in favor of being a part of the bid district. And I want to let you guys know that Tilley Investment Company very much wants to be part of this district, as we have been in the past years. Mr. Tilley, the managing partner, has been in the area since 1963 when we opened our first Shakey's restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. We opened one on Santa Monica Boulevard. We have 19 Shakey's in the LA area, and we have kept those open all these years in your district, or the Hollywood district, because they've been a wonderful community. We've seen it change and evolve up and down, and now that it's on an upswing, we'd like to see that continue. Mr. Tilley is also a permanent resident of the Hollywood since 1971. And I do have a letter that he wrote. I think Mr. Garcetti has a copy of it, but I'd like to read it to everyone. This was to Carrie Morrison of the Hollywood Mid District. Karen Starr has been in contact with you regarding the bid renewal, which includes Gower Street. Let it go on record that the Jackmar Companies, specifically Tilley Investment Company, owner of the Carriage House located at 1627 North Gower Street in Hollywood, staunchly supports the efforts of the bid program on Gower Street. We feel that the properties benefited greatly from being part of this program with cleaner streets, less graffiti, less trash, and a more beautiful community. All the things that are important to a property owner. We have seen the value of the property increase in the last years that we've been part of this program, and anticipate strong support from us in your future efforts.
If I could ask you to conclude, please.
He has personally invested a great deal of money in the Carriage House Museum, and he wants to see this area continue on its upswing that it's on now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samuel Gorin, to be followed by Jose Malagon.
Good morning, Council. I'm an owner of a 40-unit apartment on Cherokee Avenue in Hollywood. And not only the business community has improved, also my tenants and the changes have been unbelievable. And we used to have drug dealers and prostitution, and everything disappeared since the bid. And we appreciate if you will vote for continuation of the bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jose Malagon, to be followed by Cindy Cameron.
Good morning, members of the council. A few years ago, my partner and I purchased a building on Cahuenga Boulevard in Hollywood, and everyone thought we were totally crazy moving into the area, because as many are aware, that area years ago was filled with prostitution, drug, and homeless. But we rallied our neighbors and actually began the Cahuenga District Coalition to start improving our area, and at the same time on the west side of the boulevard, the first phase of the BID was starting, and when they were ready to extend the boundaries, we rallied and were able to become part of that, actually being the only street in the bid to extend all the way to Sunset. And because of all the efforts and hard work from the bid, the area has turned around tremendously, and as a result, we've actually purchased 3 other properties in the area and continue to support the bid, and we ask for your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cindy Cameron, to be followed by Chris Schabel.
I am Cindy Cameron. I am a small business owner at 6312 through 6324 Yucca Street. For 25 years, I have been in that property. I also live on the property. For 23 years, I maintained it by sweeping the sidewalk, sweeping the curbs, and removing the graffiti immediately. Since I have had my taxes doubled due to the Hollywood Entertainment District, I have not received the benefits I was supposed to get, and the graffiti has been left on the building for as long as 3 or 4 weeks before removal. There are never any tourists that come to that block on Yucca, or to my knowledge, any other of the blocks on Yucca. And I am the only one in that block that is assessed. Also, the businesses across the street from me pay nothing. 1 year ago, on August 11th, year 2000, I wrote a 2-page letter to the board of directors setting forth 9 questions on which I wanted answers based on a report, approximately a 50-page report, which I had received. I have still not received any answers on any of the questions, and I would like to give you a copy of a letter I wrote on August 11th, 2000, a 2-page copy of the questions I had asked to have the answers on, and I would like to give this to the court so that they, or to the council, so that you can understand why I'm upset over the present situation.
Thank you very much. We can get
May I
copies of that
just say
distributed.
that I take pride in my building, and I will keep the project in better condition than it was before the head took over there, because I had done it before. They removed me for 1 month in June, but reinstated me without any explanation. Under the circumstances, please remove me permanently from this special assignment. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Chris Schabel, to be followed by Gary Pasiak.
I am representing the following property owners on Gower and Yucca who wish to be out of the bid. I'm in agreement with the idea of the bid as first envisioned and presented by Jackie Goldberg, which was from La Brea to Gower along Hollywood Boulevard. Side streets were never in the plan. The owners, one from the south side of Yucca, which is Cindy, is the only person that is charged on Yucca. The other two buildings, which are to the east and to the west, are charged on Iva and Vine Street. Mr. and Mrs. John Milliken were here last time and spoke before you. He owns a small body shop on the west side of Gower, which he rents. Mr. Manny Lopez, who is in his 70s, runs another body shop west side of Gower, and Gower Associates, who own and rent a third body shop north and on the west side of Gower, and again is the only property on their block which is charged in the bid. They could sue the bid for services not received, but this would put the bid in another lawsuit. They would prefer to have lost. They would prefer to lose that money that they paid the bid and be taken out of the bid. These businesses never see any tourists or any walking traffic. The total on Gower is 5 properties. There's one property who already spoke and said they liked it, but the other 4 do not. They would take, to conclude, yes, I'm just on the last. They're on the side streets, and I feel that the bid just wants their money and doesn't want their services, or want to give them their services. I have a letter from John. I'd like Eric to receive it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gary Passia.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to speak to you. My name is Gary Pasiak. I moved to Hollywood 27 years ago from the city of Chicago, and I was very disappointed. Hollywood Boulevard was not anything like it was supposed to be. It didn't live up to any of its reputation. There was prostitution, drug dealing, rampant throughout the neighborhood, and nothing really changed over the years. Finally, when this bid, this Hollywood Improvement District took place, was the first time when changes actually started to occur that were positive. The neighborhood now is demanding a higher rate of rent. There are more people using Hollywood. Cahuenga Boulevard, as Mr. Malagan indicated, is doing quite well on its own. But the Hollywood Business Improvement District is the mechanism that really made the success that Hollywood is currently enjoying possible. I would strongly support that the City Council continues this Business Improvement District. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on this item. Any members wishing to speak? The chair recognizes Mr. Garcetti.
Mr. President, colleagues, thank you to all who have come here and testified today. I rise in support of the renewal of the Hollywood Entertainment bid, while also conscious of some of the items that have come before us, and knowing that my office will work with some of the folks who have come here to try to address the concerns. I think it is important that we have the geographical coverage that we do, because for those of us who believe that the Hollywood Renaissance should go eastward, I think the inclusion of Gower is an important inclusion. We'll make sure the services are delivered equally and evenly, but nevertheless, maybe one day this is something that can continue down the line. Another thing that may be of interest to the folks who have come here today is, as the chair-elect of the Economic Development and Employment Committee, we have supervision of the bids, and there was a commission that was put together to study communication between the community and the bids, between the city and the bids, and making sure that that is streamlined and improved to help the bids, to help the community, and to make them more efficient bodies. I know that that is something that I'm going to take up again with the city clerk, who has those recommendations, and certainly look forward to public comment during that period to hear from both the community and some of the businesses to make sure that we can improve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll on item number 14. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That item is approved. Mr. Reyes?
21?
Yeah, item 21, I believe, is next. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. President, item number 21. Although, before taking up item number 21, 42D, there is a request from the city attorney to continue that item to September 5th.
Request colleagues to continue item 42D without objection. We shall continue item 42D.
Item number 21, called special by Councilmember Reyes.
Item number 21 is before us. Mr. Reyes.
Yes, I need to recuse myself from this vote, so I'll be stepping out of the building.
Okay. I believe Mr. Reyes has left chambers. Any members wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That item is approved. Next item, please.
Item number 22, called special by Councilmember Holden.
Item number 22 is now before us. Mr. Holden? You called item 22 special? Mr. Holden is satisfied. Any other members wishing to speak on item 22? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Item 22 is approved. Next item.
Item number 24, called special by Councilmember Misakowski.
Ms. Misakowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask the staff of the Ethics Commission to come forward and explain. We have two different things. Members of the council, this is relating separately and singularly, as I understand it, to the special election that's being held and has been called, I think was called in item number 20 for CD2. And this item talks about when we give notice for that election and when and how we allow candidates or people who are going to be qualifying to become candidates in that election can have matching funds. And there is a difference between what the committee has recommended, as I understand it, and what the was recommended from ethics. And I'd like to have that explained as to what the difference is, if you can.
Yes, thank you, council members. Leanne Pelham with the City Ethics Commission. Just as the council recently adopted the ordinance for the 4th District special election, our commission proposed for the 2nd District special election that whenever candidates begin to fundraise for their campaigns, that those funds should help them qualify for the public matching funds program. And this is, as you know, because the city's comprehensive program was designed to help keep city races competitive by evening the playing field for as many candidates as possible to the greatest extent possible. To participate in the program, candidates have to demonstrate a base of support by raising $25,000 within a specified period of time. Current law, however, only permits candidates in a special election to use funds that they've raised once candidate filing week occurs, when they file their declaration of intent to be a candidate with the city clerk's office towards the $25,000 threshold. So the earlier proposal we sent was to rectify that inconsistency because that was special and unique to the 4th District. We had an ordinance that we sent over specific to the 2nd District as well. The ordinance that the Commission transmitted would allow funds raised from whenever candidates begin fundraising for their campaigns in the 2nd District, and that those funds would help count towards purposes of qualifying for the matching funds program.
Let me ask you, when can a candidate in the 2nd District officially be allowed to raise funds for that race?
In 1995, under the similar circumstances, the Commission advised candidates at that time that they could begin fundraising for office once essentially there was a reasonable probability that the seat would be vacant. So in that case, for example, Councilmember Yaroslavsky, who was running for the County Board of Supervisors, once the unofficial results of that election were in, we advised candidates that they could begin fundraising at that time. Of course, the qualification window was a separate issue, but in terms of when they could begin fundraising, it was when we believed that there was a reasonable probability. Of course, in the situation that we have before us now, the question is, what is that event that triggers
years, or what is that event that's a reasonable probability? And our view is that it would be when the council would call an election in this district, that it doesn't need to wait until the seat is actually vacant. That wasn't the approach the city took 5 years ago, and we think that that isn't the approach the city needs to take now.
And what is the difference in the date as to when that fundraising could begin and qualify for matching funds between what the Ethics Commission sent forward and the ordinance before it? Because I see there's two versions.
Yes, the version that the Ethics Commission sent forward would permit candidates to begin fundraising after the effective date of the ordinance calling the election. So in essence, the ordinance that you approved, if it's signed by the mayor, then candidates could begin fundraising essentially immediately for this race. Under the alternative approach that was recommended by the committee, I believe it's an October 1st date, that would be the first time candidates could begin fundraising.
And do you know, or perhaps I can have the committee explain why there was a deferral to October 1st if we call the election today and the mayor signs it within the next day or two, that would allow the window for fundraising and matching funds to begin as of the point of having called that official election, versus waiting another 6 weeks for the candidates in that race having raised money, not being eligible to have it matched until October 1st.
That's a question for the committee.
Okay. Members of the council, it seems to me that we are looking at a rather short window anyway. And the other ordinance we're going to be dealing with right now is that in a normal race, people have 18 months to raise money, and we might look at shortening that to 12. In this issue, we have fewer than 6 months. We have an election that's been called in December. And it seems to me that the ability to have that fundraising matched should be as soon as we have the certainty that we've called the race and the election is going to begin. And it seems to me that in that case, we're not talking about an inordinate amount of time, but we're talking about a difference of perhaps 6 weeks in what is going to be a short, perhaps 4 month, 4.5 month process anyway, and that 6 weeks can be critical. So I am not persuaded, and I'd like to hear from the chair of the committee or the committee itself as to why they chose to defer matching until October 1st.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Mr. Garcetti, followed by Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I rise in support of the original Ethics Commission recommendation. For all of us who have just gone through an election, I think the shorter the fundraising period, the worse it is for democracy in many cases. In this case, if we have such a narrow window, it only benefits those who already have an extensive fundraising base. It makes it difficult and I'm not commenting specifically on the second council district race. I'm talking about the principle which should rise above the particular here. In this case, or in any cases like this, if you only have those who have well-established fundraising bases who can raise very quickly, perhaps the maximum amount of money, it is something that penalizes those newcomers who would like to come in and need more time to raise the same amount of money. I think that is really critical. I would urge my colleagues to support that as well. I think that we do a disservice if we have one election in which people can fundraise for 18 months, another one in which we narrow it. We know once the elections are called that this is going to be happening. I've talked to candidates who are doing this right now. Even those who have very strong fundraising bases would love to have more time. It is not something that penalizes any candidates, but I do think it opens up the democratic process and people to be able to come in who otherwise would have more difficulty being competitive. Thank you.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of the committee report and move the committee report. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Garcetti, Ms. Misikowski, and for the most part, I agree with your concerns, but let me share with you the perspective and the approach that I took in committee. First of all, the issue about consistency, because yet again, we have unforeseen impacts of term limits. And openings and special elections and what have you. We have a special election going on right now in the 4th Council District. And certain rules apply to the candidates running in that district based on a vacancy. The difference being, in the 4th Council District, when we knew of the vacancy, we knew of the vacancy, period. Here in the 2nd Council District, we have a situation where we think we foresee a vacancy. And although I don't believe Mr. Wax is going to change his mind because he's got a great gig in New York waiting for him, by all legal and technical matters, he has the option of changing his mind. So we have a potential vacancy, and so therefore, is it the same, is it different than the 4th Council District? The 7th Council District, when I first ran, was a vacant seat, or what have you. So to change the rules from one special election to another, I think is very important to think about. We don't want to change the rules. If we're talking about a level playing field, if we want to have a fair process for everybody, we have to insist, to the extent reasonable, on consistent rules for everybody, number one. Second, a specific concern of mine. If we were to allow people to raise money early, or if we were to allow people to have, to qualify for matching funds at a point in time that's different than regular elections or other special elections. And again, the possibility that the person to vacate the seat may change their mind. What precedent is there to allow for or to require the giving back of those contributions? So there's a number of questions that come to mind, and given some uncertainties, given some of those inconsistencies, I chose to, as committee chair, to recommend that in this particular case, in the 2nd Council District election, to allow for candidates to declare their candidacy once the seat is technically vacant, and to be able to create committees to fundraise the same day that that district is then vacant, and to allow for, to maximize the time period in which they can receive matching funds, to open the window for receiving matching funds and qualifying for matching funds on the very first day that they can then raise money. And I see also here the CLA and the city clerk, who also testified in committee, and invite them to come forward and respond to the comments I've just made, or share anything that was discussed in committee that I might have left out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move through the speakers list, and the questions that Mr. Padilla raised are certainly appropriate to be answered by the staff at the desk. We now recognize Mr. Weiss, followed by Mr. Wax.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate being recognized, but actually I would like to hear, before I put my foot in my mouth, the response from the CLA and the clerk and from the city attorney as to the statements that the chair of the committee just made. I think they're important to hear. And I would also like to have the city attorney in particular address my concern, which is sort of, well, what's the harm if people start fundraising now and Warhol Foundation decides to give it all away on September 15 to, some special gallery in South America, then Joel stays. What's the harm? And what is the legal process for returning contributions?
Thanks so very much. We appreciate the introduction of that novel thought, Mr. Weiss, Warhol Foundation's intent. Members of the staff, anyone in particular prepared to respond to those questions? First from Mr. Padilla and then from Mr. Weiss.
Mr. President, in the past, the two instances that created the situation that ethics was trying to correct was Mr. Yaroslavsky's election to supervisor and Mr. Ferraro's passing on. In both instances, there was a definite time and place in which there was going to be a vacancy. With all due respect to Mr. Wax or anybody else in the future, that is always indefinite. And the reason for and I recommended the change that the committee made, is that there was going to be a definite time that there would be a vacancy, and it's when that vacancy happened, then the fundraising should begin. The ordinance for creating the election is an attempt to avoid the situation that we had in the 13th district and in other situations of a long delay before we actually had an election. And I think that the only thing that happens there is that city clerk will expend do some preparatory work, and that will be for naught if that turns around. But we're setting a precedent that when people say they're going to leave and have not left, or for some reason there is an indication that there could be a vacancy, and just because we're trying to respond to a quicker election so there won't be a period of time for a long vacancy, then at that point, it seemed appropriate to me that the fundraising start when there actually is a vacancy.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now hear from Mr. Wax. Sir?
I think it's valuable if the members of the panel can answer our questions.
I thought that was an answer that was going to suffice in light of Mr. Kerry's reluctance to speak up publicly, that is.
I'm always reluctant to speak up. We established the election ordinance with an operative date of October 1, primarily so we could start the process as quickly as possible. When we were discussing this issue in committee, really the technical issue was that if we do not have an operative date in the campaign ordinance, that as soon as the election ordinance becomes effective, and it will become effective upon publication, not operative in terms of the declaration of intent, then candidates can start the fundraising, as I understand it from past legal advice and practice of the commission. So if the council decides as a matter of policy that you do not want the fundraising to start until the operative date, there is an actual vacancy on October 1st, then we needed to change the campaign fundraising ordinance to have an identical operative date of October 1. The policy issue of raising money before we actually have the vacancy, again, that's a policy issue for the council to address. But the election ordinance was passed and set up to start the process as early as we could, given Councilman Wax's stated departure date. So we could start that process on the 1st of October.
Mr. Albrecht.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, I hope I understood your questions, and if I'm not responding to them as directly as you want, please let me know. There would be nothing illegal about allowing fundraising to begin before the vacancy actually occurs or before the ordinance calling the election becomes operative. Technically, right now, today, someone could begin fundraising. Someone could have begun fundraising several weeks ago. The only provision we have in the law right now that talks about the beginning of the fundraising window says that the fundraising window begins 18 months before an election. So, technically, anybody can raise money within 18 months before the election. The problem with that, as we saw when Mr. Yaroslavsky was elected County Board of Supervisors, was we don't know when that 18-month period begins because we don't know whether there's going to be a vacancy and when the election is going to take place. Here, once an ordinance is adopted calling the election, we probably have the same kind of reasonable probability that that election is going to take place under these circumstances as we did under the circumstances involving Mr. Yaroslavsky's going from the City Council to the Board of Supervisors. Technically, just as Mr. Wax right now could change his mind, Mr. Yaroslavsky, even after having been elected, could have changed his mind and decided that he really wanted to work for this council and not for the county. As a technical matter, he could have done that. There was no vacancy at the time. So as a legal matter, you can make either policy choice. And I'm not going to give you policy advice.
Mr. President, if I might comment, please. To suggest that Mr. Yaroslavsky would have done all that, or been elected, and then decided not to go, certainly is one point of view. I think it's more likely that when Mr. Yaroslavsky, this is more tantamount to when Mr. Yaroslavsky decided to run for supervisor to begin fundraising, as opposed to Mr. Yaroslavsky actually having won the election. And I think as this body knows that there have been members of this body who have decided to run for other offices, and it has not always proved to be successful.
All right. Mr. Weiss, we trust that that's a satisfactory set of responses. We will now recognize Mr. Wax, followed by Mr. Holden.
Is the difference of opinion when to begin fundraising or when the fundraising is eligible for matching funds, or is it both?
I think that the difference in approach is when fundraising would begin.
Because, as Mr. Alperin says, it is legal for people to begin it now, assuming that the election occurs within 18 months, which is a pretty reasonable probability.
If I could just clarify one point on that, I think he said it's technically possible, but our advice to those individuals who've been calling to inquire about when they might be able to throw their hats in the ring and start fundraising has been that we've been
I think perhaps as a compromise, it seemed to me that in announcing when I did and what I would intend to do, that there would be a sufficient enough period of time that a lot of candidates could come forward and you could have a meaningful election, that someone wouldn't be handpicked, someone couldn't go in and just buy the election, someone, wouldn't just be the insider selected by people, that you'd have enough time for the community and for the candidates to come forward. There are now 4 or 5 of them. Enough time for the community to begin to get to know these people and meet them and have a meaningful campaign, and still, because of the ordinance we passed, have an election in a quick time, which will be December 11th. Perhaps you can, and that process has begun and people are out there campaigning and there are more people coming forward every day. Perhaps you could allow them to raise money now that would be eligible for matching funds, but not pay those matching funds until the legal certainty of the actual election, so that the city doesn't, give out any money that may not be spent, but the candidates are at their own risk. They could raise their own and be at their own risk if someone did decide to change their mind. It's not likely that I'm going to do that, Mr. Holden, to your chagrin. But I'm not going to do that. But it just seemed to me that we needed to have a quick enough election, but yet a maximum period of time in which the process could go, so that you really have a meaning. This will, for all practical purposes, whoever gets elected may be in office for some time, and you wanted to have a meaningful process out there, time enough for people to have a campaign. And I tried to, in some way, control that by giving enough notice for that to begin, and yet still having a timely enough election before the holidays began, which will be December 11th. So my suggestion would be maybe let people start raising the money now, and that if and when that there is an election, and those funds would otherwise be the kind of funds that would be eligible for matching funds, at that point you can give them credit for that, but don't pay any matching funds until that time actually legally occurs.
If I could just remind the council that, in fact, under our current law, no candidate actually receives any public matching funds until the city clerk's office has certified that they are on the ballot. So that is a safety measure already in place.
All righty, Mr. Holden?
Yeah, that takes care of my concern. Mr. Wax could always change his mind, was a problem too. And, not a problem, not really a problem, because we like to agree to stay, Mr. Wax. I'm disappointed that you're leaving, in fact. But you can change his mind, which means there will be no election. Yeah, that's right. And you can't begin to raise money until 1 year prior to the election, that is for city council. No.
18 months currently.
You changed it 18 months?
It's currently 18 months. The 12 months was the topic of another item on the agenda.
Oh, well, then we're not going to change it. 18 months at 12, okay. Well, in any case, that's the story. Mr. Wax could change his mind. He's telling us today that he will not change his mind.
Reminded me, Mr. Holden, that now that I'm leaving, you won't be able to get your constituent services director anymore.
Yes, I will too. You just pay for those directories out of the foundation money, not the general fund anymore. Which I thought was kind of strange when you're running for office. Oh, the Ethics Commission sitting. I shouldn't say that.
Mr. Holden?
Yeah, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just want to say that I think Mr. Wax has answered our question. And, there's always an open arms for you, Joe. Just hang in there.
All right, the chair now recognizes Ms. Mizukowski and followed by Mr. Garcetti for the second time.
I'm going to move that we do, as a substitute, not to move the recommendation of the ordinance as submitted by the chair, but as that was submitted by the Ethics Commission. And I think as the Ethics Commission has confirmed that Mr. Wax's compromise or belief that people could start raising money as soon as the date of certainty of the election is valid, which is as soon as the mayor signs the ordinance, that fundraising can begin. These funds will be matched, but no matched funds will be given until they have actually qualified, been on the ballot, which will come sometime after October 1st. I think we've got a short enough window as it is, and although there can be an issue of time between 12 months and 18 months, here we're not talking about that. We're talking about 6 more weeks in a 4-month window at best. And I think to spread the diffusion of money, of ability to raise the money and have it matched in this shorter time frame and not be dependent on an excessive amount of special kind of funds or outside independent expenditures. This is the best way we can create that level feeling today, and that's my motion. I would also like to suggest for those who've been concerned about what happens if money is raised and there is no election for whatever reason, the election code spells that out. If there is an election and there is either excess money or you decide as a candidate you're going to pull back and you've raised money, you can do one of 3 things with it. You can donate that money to the city treasury, you can return it to your contributors on a pro-rata basis, or it can be given to a charitable nonprofit 501(c), as I understand it. So that would remain whether or not those people qualify, don't qualify, etc., or use it up in their expenditures just in getting to whatever distance they think they'll get before they might not be a candidate. So I think that the version as recommended by the Ethics Commission is the more appropriate ordinance to move forward with, to give the best window, the most diversity of ability to fund and get different candidates in the race. And so that's my motion.
Thank you very much. Chair now recognizes Mr. Garcetti and then followed by Mr. Padilla to close. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. A lot of us talked about in the last few weeks just common sense. I think this is really a time when we just need some common sense here. We have a commitment from Mr. Wax that he is indeed resigning. He's not running for governor. He's not running for something else. He's going to do something outside of politics. We know this is going to happen. We should deal with this particular case. It doesn't set a bad precedent. It's not about future times like Zev Yaroslavsky when he ran and still would potentially have retained his seat. This is where somebody has publicly stated they are going to vacate it. The public, like when we did our reorganization of the committees, we spoke a lot about common sense. The public doesn't care so much about the process. Obviously, as long as it is legal, they care about the outcome and they care about fairness, and it's pretty clear which way we should vote to achieve that today. Thank you.
Mr. Padilla, to close.
Before I close, a couple of quick questions. Procedural. What we have before us is an ordinance, I understand, to establish the dates or to allow the candidates to begin fundraising even before there's a vacancy, even before they declare as candidates, correct?
Yes, our ordinance would allow the candidates, whenever they begin to fundraise, to count those.
So let's make an assumption right now. First is that it gets adopted today. It still goes forward to the mayor for signature, and it goes into effect immediately upon the signature?
It would take effect upon publication, yes.
Now, if somebody were to withhold today or vote no today, it carries over for a second reading, which, because we're going into recess next week, all of a sudden we're in the first week of September, right? That's correct, that's what I'm hearing. So we're talking either the first week or two of September versus October 1st. The practical impact here, one way or the other, is what, 3 weeks, more or less? I just wanted to highlight that, colleagues, because the concern for me isn't as much what's the practical effect on this particular special election, but what legal or technical issues or Pandora's box can we possibly be getting into, or what kind of precedent are we setting for the future? So we're going to vote whichever way we're going to vote today, and one of the two reports or recommendations is going to be adopted. The practical effect on this particular election doesn't seem to be that significant. And the concern about a candidate being viable versus not being viable because they're allowed to raise money earlier versus not being able to, again, in this particular case, we're talking about 3 months versus 3.5 months. It's not as significant. But we should be conscious of and cognizant about what kind of precedents we're setting for future scenarios, because we've only raised 2. One is a member of the city council running for a different political office, and what happens when they win or when they don't win, or what happens if they win a primary in a safe Democratic or a safe Republican seat, when 99% odds are they're going to win the general or the runoff. But there's other scenarios. We have someone who's going to resign, 4 or 5 months in advance. There's other scenarios out there that we haven't conceived of, and when that comes to happen, we're going to look back on what we're doing today as the precedent, and we're going to scratch our heads and have to come up with a third or fourth interpretation of what should we do then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. That closes the discussion. No other persons to be heard. Madam Clerk, I think there's a substitute motion that has been offered by Ms. Zukowski, which takes precedent. Is that not correct, Madam
Yes,
City
Mr.
Attorney?
President, I didn't hear a second for that motion.
Is there a second to that? Multiple seconds.
Point of information.
The chair recognizes Mr. Holden.
The significant difference, if any, between what Mr. Padilla has proposed us from the committee or Ms. Zukowski as a substitute motion, what is the significant difference, if any, before we vote?
All right, point of clarification.
I believe the difference between the two ordinances is once this ordinance becomes effective upon publication, candidates for Council District 2, the special election, can start raising campaign funds.
As opposed to?
The other ordinance that Mr. Padilla had recommended had an operative date of October 1 for fundraising, start of fundraising.
Because Joel will still be in office? When are you leaving, Joel? Huh? October 1st.
Mr. Holden, I think Mr. Padilla's comment was based on the timing of the effective date of the potential effective date of the ordinance. That if there is 12 vote, if it is unanimous today and it goes to the mayor, and he was to sign it today, it would be effective today. If there isn't,
well, it would not be effective today. I've got to publish the thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Deaton, you're wrong again, but go ahead.
All right.
Effectively, if Mr. Kerry could do things in a timely fashion, it would. As quickly as Mr. Kerry could finish that job, it would become effective. However, if there is not a unanimous vote today, it will go over to the first. It will go over to the first week in September for second reading, and it will be signed by the mayor sometime along. So it would be the time difference if there isn't a unanimous vote today is about 3 weeks.
Oh, so that's the way you handle it then, Mr. Padilla. So, no, I'm going to withhold.
All right, Madam Clerk, let us then proceed if there's no other clarifying questions to be posed. Mr. Wax.
Does pass, and it's effective either when you now or in early September. It's eligible for matching funds, right? Anything raised under this time frame would be eligible for matching funds.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's important.
All right, Mr. Padilla.
Question for the clerk. We just heard from Mr. Holden that he wishes to withhold on this. So a couple of questions. One is, we have a substitute motion. Would the first vote be on the substitute motion, or the first vote whether or not to substitute? And what is the impact of Mr. Holden's desire to withhold?
Well, proceed, Madam Clerk.
The first vote would be on the question of whether to substitute.
All right. All right, shall we then proceed? Is all minds clear in this regard? Madam Clerk, please open the roll on whether or not to substitute.
Hold on, you got to switch us. Make sure they get our votes right.
Yes, all right. Mr. Padilla wishes to make sure that the correct Ridley Thomas is at that desk. All right. All right, please close the roll. Now tabulate the vote.
9 ayes, 4 noes.
All right, then we proceed to the next item, and it is before us.
That is the presentation of the ordinance as recommended by the Ethics Commission.
It is the Ms. Zukowski motion pursuant to our deciding to substitute, correct? Madam Clerk, please open the roll on.
President,
Please
in the
hold
interest
the
of
roll.
a compromise, I'm going to withhold, just between the two.
Mr. Holden, do you wish to be recognized?
I'm just going to withhold. I'm announcing you right now, so that's better than you don't have to call the roll.
All right, in light of the fact that Mr. Holden has reasserted that he wishes to withhold, this matter then is continued to what?
September 4th.
September 4th? The second weekend, the second reading will then be on September 4th, pursuant to Mr. Holden withholding. All right, then we should move to the next item on our agenda.
Item number 29, called special by Councilmember Misakowski.
All right, the chair recognizes Ms. Misakowski on item number 29.
Members of the council, this is the issue which we had last gone through in June, which was the acceptance. I'd asked the Ethics Commission to stay at the table. This is the ethics ordinance that had been presented to the council by the Ethics Commission, after a 2-year study called Investing in Competition, Campaign Finance Reform in the City of LA, and looking at a decade long of our reform with matching funds, with the kinds of things that we had put into effect by a vote of the people in 1990 or 91. The council voted overwhelmingly to approve this, and it had a couple of major elements. One, it dealt with the issue of time, and it dealt with the issue of trying to make our matching funds go farther. So it increased the amount of matching funds, and it also took the issue of time down from 18-month fundraising window to 12-month fundraising window. What our Ethics Commission had found after holding 8 public hearings and hearing from current council members, former council members, current candidates for office, candidates who had lost office, was League of Women Voters, attorneys who represented candidates in reform law. Out of that Ethics Commission, which was then appointed by 1 member by Mayor Reardon, 1 member by the City Attorney Jim Hahn, 1 member by former Controller Rick Tuttle, 1 member by former Council President John Ferraro, and 1 member by Council Pro Tem at that time, Ruth Galanter. All 5 of those commissioners recommended this ordinance. It is that ordinance as before us today on a veto, and I understand that the mayor has vetoed it on the grounds that he would like to do something more comprehensive, would like to do something covering some of the issues that came up in the last election. The most significant thing that came up in the last election was independent expenditure, which is not something that the council by itself can deal with. That was when we tried to deal with it, we got shot down by Sacramento saying you can't, there's a conflict. What this ordinance does, and my motion is going to be pursuant to, I think, what Mrs. Galanter asked, that the normal vote of the council on a veto is shall we override. And because it's got sent to committee, it's now should we sustain it. But I am going to move a substitute that we override the mayor's veto. I think the 2 most significant things we can deal with, and whether we hear it at the local level in politics or the national level or any other level, the 2 most important things are people think that we spend too much time, that we have our elections that go on and on and on, and we don't really give a window, a period of time. What was found by the Ethics Commission was that the 18-month window for fundraising was mostly utilized by incumbents. And if it was just a year out from an election, that was just a date that was certifiable, was real, it was, people started to think about it and focus on it, and also the effect of special interest money. And by increasing the matching funds provision, which was testified to by a number of people who'd been in that arena in support of it, I think that this was a good recommendation from the Ethics Commission, a good ordinance. The council overwhelmingly supported it. And the hesitancy I have about saying, wait, we're going to do it better, is the more that something is comprehensive or attempts to be comprehensive, the more it has pieces in it that can create some conflict and get torn apart. This was one that was strongly recommended, as I said, unanimously by the Ethics Commission, talked about for a good 2 hours on this council before we adopted it. We overwhelmingly recommended it, and we're faced with the veto today with a promise that we can do better. The last thing I would just want to say is we've got a very, very, very short window in which we can do better. This study by the Ethics Commission was done in 98 and 99. They approved
approved it in the year 2000 and then held it because we were in the midst of an election, and they didn't want to come in and make a change when we were in the midst of an election. Members of the council, we start our next election cycle for the year 2003 under our current ordinance in October. So we've got a window between now and October 10th if we're going to change something. If we wait until after October and say we're going to change something, then we're in the middle of a cycle already that people have already started, and we won't be able to change it until 2005. So that is what the fear I have about changing anything. I think this was a good ordinance, a good start. By all means, we can do other things, we can add. The Ethics Commission has not been hesitant to bring forward things that the council looks at, but I think if we foreclose this today, we are looking at election of 2005 before we implement any reform.
Thank you, Ms. Misikowski. Before I call upon the next speaker, I believe clarification from the city attorney is in order as to exactly what has been agendized, posted, and what is before us today.
What's before you on the agenda is a communication from the Chair of Rules and Elections asking, recommending for sustaining the mayor's veto. However, there is a motion to substitute that by Ms. Misikowski, which is to override. If the motion to override does not pass, then you have your motion to sustain. That is an 8-vote item. If that does not pass, then you would have your override. If somebody makes a motion to override, that would be by 10 votes. You also have 3 other recommendations. If the motion to sustain is passed, then you should vote on the other 3 items on the communication separately from the motion to sustain.
So we'll go over all of that again before we cast a vote. But the highlights of that, the executive summary, is there's 4 recommendations as part of the communication from committee. Only the first of which deals directly with the mayor's veto. Items 2, 3, and 4 on the recommendation speak to the issue in general and recommend actions. We'll vote on those separately after the resolution is brought upon the mayor's veto matter. But we'll clarify that again before we start pushing our yes or no buttons. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues. Money and politics. Money and politics. You ask Americans what is the most corrupting thing about politics. They time and time have the impression, rightly or wrongly, that somehow money corrupts politics, that the process that we have right now is corrupt, that we here are corrupt. And I don't think that we need to add more fertilizer on this steaming compost heap of cynicism around this country. We have a responsibility to do something which will be comprehensive. We have a responsibility to overcome nitpicking comprehensive reform in this city and making sure that it doesn't pass, because as Councilmember Misikowski said, when we do add more and more to a package, it suddenly becomes more and more unfavorable to enough of us that it doesn't get passed, and then we say people, well, we want to have comprehensive reform, we're not going to do just bit pieces along the way. We have to think about that bind that we're in. Join me, join Mayor Hahn, join Council President Padilla, join Councilmember Misikowski, and do something comprehensive. I would like to add today, because I'd like to give the benefit of the doubt to the new mayor who has publicly said that he is in favor of a comprehensive package. But I think that we have a responsibility not to lose again another opportunity, because that deadline of the beginning of October, we have a responsibility to think 2 years ahead. We've had the hearings, we've had the forums. We haven't been included on them because we were running for office. So allow us to chime in for this next month and a half and then be part of something that is comprehensive. Ms. Pelham told a member of my staff, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, that it can't be done. Take that as a challenge to ourselves, that we cannot do something quickly on comprehensively reforming campaigns. Can I ask to extend the time, please, without objection? We need to be able to do that if we are going to not just let this slip through the cracks as it does time and time again, not because people have ill intention, but because we can't muster the political will and do the homework. We have 2 weeks of a break. Do the homework in this time. The friendly amendment that I would like to add is to the second part of the chair's communication, that after it says, let's convene a meeting of the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, that we would add the following words: by such a date that would allow for the City Council to consider a more comprehensive package by September 21st, which by my calculations is probably the time that we need to do this in order to have a little bit of a window to actually address this. And I encourage the Ethics Commission to hold one more hearing, and I know you've done so many with so many people, but to make sure that each one of us that has just gone through this process, because there are new issues, I agree with the mayor, the independent expenditure issues that came up are new and need to be aired, and we each need and have a responsibility to chime in on this and not push it off for 2 more years. Make sure that we address independent expenditures, matching funds, whether it's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, or possibly going to full public financing in some way, whether we look at the fundraising window of being shorter, and also whether what we look at, I think one of the most important things that we just addressed a second ago with CD2, what we do in an era of term limits. Do we want to move municipal elections back to even years so that we don't consistently have, as we had in the 13th district, and it's coming to a district near you soon, a window of 8 or 9 months of non-representation? We cannot stand for that, and we cannot stand for having anything but the most cutting-edge campaign finance and ethics laws in this country. So there's the problem, simply stated, and a challenge to each and every one of us, that if today we do sustain this veto, and I do think that we should give the benefit of the doubt and take the mayor at his words that he does want a comprehensive package, while asking him to know about our deadlines, and each of us realizing that we will lose this opportunity and yet another election go by, we bring that comprehensive package by the beginning of October. Thank you.
Leanne, do you wish to respond?
Yes, if I could, just briefly, I appreciate the council member listing a litany of number of issues that we do need to look at, regardless of whether the council sustains or overrides a veto today. And since he shared the comment that I made with the staff member, I'm sure he won't mind me sharing the additional comments as to why I said it won't happen in 2 months. The issues that we're looking at, as you know, the candidate statements came in the end of July. We're in the middle of doing the analysis at this point. And as we've said before to the council, there's a conference that we're doing in October where we hope to bring a number of people, including former candidates and treasurers and consultants, as well as the public, to come together and engage in a dialogue about where these laws ought to go. I would just remind the council we do, as you know, have the most comprehensive set of laws at the local level in the country. We'll continue to be seen as a model for these laws, and we very strongly share the council members' views that these laws should continue to be cutting edge and effective and workable. And so that's the end to which we are continuing to work, and it is our hope that whatever recommendations we have as a result of this election cycle, we'll be able to bring those forward to the council in a very timely way, but I do think it's overly optimistic to think that can happen by October 1st.
Mr. Wax.
First, we could adopt Ms. Miskowski's motion, and if any comprehensive reforms come within the time frame, Mr. Garcetti, they can supersede and change accordingly anything that you may not like in Ms. Miskowski's motion. So I support Ms. Miskowski's motion for the reasons she mentioned. But the mayor's also right. You're kidding yourself if you think that this is really going to change the fundamental problem. There is a big problem right now, so big that the tragedy may be the quickest and most meaningful reform would be to gut the laws that we now have, which we worked so hard to put in. We did have the best campaign, among the best campaign finance laws in the country. Mr. Bernardi is the one who gets the credit for starting it by getting the petitions for 312. And we have, since 312, and a history throughout the mid-80s through the 90s, constantly, with the voters' approval, adopted what was among the most comprehensive laws on limits on spending, on limits on contributions, and on full disclosure. And with one fell swoop, Mr. Garcetti, Prop 34 drove such a truck through all of those laws that for all practical purposes now you have two campaigns going side by side. You have the campaign by which people obey the city's laws and are limited in spending and limited in contributions and limited by full disclosure. And then you have superseded over that for two candidates, one who may get the Republican nomination and one who may get the Democratic, unlimited sources of funds from unknown sources at the time they're given, with no limits, such as to the effect that the people obeying the laws that we put into place to govern it are the ones who are at the greatest disadvantage, cannot effectively compete, and you almost get to the point where the quickest thing to do would be to get rid of it all until you could come up with something that governs it all, because right now everybody who obeys the law, except two possible ones, really are at an incredible disadvantage. Likewise, you had things like in the city attorney's race, and this has nothing to do with which candidate, that's absolutely nothing to do with it, but you can have an independent expenditure that is so beyond anything that the other laws govern, and yet still get the benefit of having the spending limits lifted and the contribution amounts lifted, and still be the beneficiary of the independent expenditure. I mean, it is so skewed now by the impact of what independent expenditures are allowing, particularly under Prop 34 and your interpretation of Prop 34, that you actually are at a point, Ms. Galanter once warned of this, and I never thought she would be right, but she was right in terms of when she opposed the original campaign finance laws, which was not a very popular thing to do at the time, but because the laws just got us to a point where all the well-intentioned laws in the world are now acting at a disadvantage in creating the problem you spell out, Mr. Garcetti, is a real one.
Mr. Wax.
It's not only perception, in fact, sometimes it's true, and that's why there's the perception. But what are we going to do about it? And with the independent expenditure thing where it's at now, Ms. Pelham, you can't wait, and you've got to be proactive. I thought it was wrong for you to take that interpretation of Prop 34. I think we should have held our ground. We should have said no matching funds, no changes in limits, and let them sue us, rather than us saying, oh, that's what Prop 34 looks like it allows now. We have opened up a situation now whereby the people who obey the most well-intentioned and best refined, defined laws that we've had in a long time are the ones that are actually now at a competitive disadvantage with those who have found a way to get around them. That is never what was intended when Ernie Bernardi started his petitions and when all the rest of us got behind tough campaigns.
Thank you, Mr. Wax.
And you've got to do something about that long before the next election.
Thank you very much. Everyone's really brought up some great issues, and I too feel like we have a great opportunity, which is why I'm not sure when this is coming up for a vote, but I'm voting to sustain the mayor's veto on this, because I also take him at his word that he wants to do more. He wants to have a more comprehensive approach to campaign finance reform. And you're right, Eric, Councilman Garcetti. You know, Congress cannot do it. They have tried and failed. The state won't even touch this. Those who run for state offices, you know, have an unlimited amounts of resources poured in their campaigns, and there are certain parts of this ordinance that I am not in favor of. And with all due respect, you know, the former council is the one that overwhelmingly supported that ordinance, and as of September, we will have 7 new council members sitting on this council, and I think we have a right to reattack this problem. And again, many of us were in the midst of campaigns when you were holding your hearings. We did not testify. We did not fill out the surveys, and I think we have a lot of experience of recent campaigns that we can contribute to this. One of the reasons I'm in opposition of shortening the campaign fundraising window from 18 to 12 is you know, you come up against you know, other election cycles, and you come up against the aggregate amount, and if you've got the people running for citywide offices who have a longer period of time to raise their money than those of us running for council, you know, you have people who tell you, sorry, I'm already at the limit because if I contributed to the mayor, the city attorney, and the city controller, and you're at a big disadvantage. Also, many people, myself included, you know, I've had to work for a living my whole life, contrary to what a lot of people think, and I cannot just quit work and spend the whole time campaigning. So I think for single women, particularly who are holding down jobs and want to run for office, we need to give them all the advantage they
they can, and the longer time to raise money is much more advantageous to them, because otherwise we're still protecting the wealthy and we're still protecting the incumbents in all these council races. So I think we need to take another look at it. I suggested this before, that we have a roundtable kind of opportunity where we all can really sit at the table and bring up these issues, bring up these concerns, and come up with what I think will be some real reforms to how people run for election in the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Mr. Holden.
Now, Joel made a good point on Prop 34. Take it on would have been to stall it, and it could not have been implemented during the last election. You know, just do what you have to do sometimes. But I think what we really have to do is, as I said to you when you first brought this matter before us, that we got to go into Sacramento, President, Intergovernmental Relations Chair and I, and try and get some legislation implemented for the purpose of exempting us from that proposition. I think that could be the case. If we request it for our elections here in the city, because we have more stringent laws, I do not believe that members of the legislature, especially the majority of those who don't represent this area and intend to run for city council, would support it, would support that which we advocate. So we just need to put our experience together, go to Sacramento and make those necessary changes in the law. And there might not come at a time when we need it for the next election, unfortunately. But that should not stop us. We should work hard to make sure that happens. I think it can happen. No matter what we do, you close one door, another one opens for the guy who wants to circumvent ethics laws. And I'll give you one case in point. Mr. Wu would have been the mayor, except for the fact that Mr. Reardon had a lot more money than he did. And he played the game very cleverly, because the notification was not given that he was going to put $3 million in the primary election until toward the end of the election. And he was able to use it effectively, and therefore, which opened the door of opportunity for Wu to raise money, matching funds, but not at that rate, not at that level, not to be compatible with that election. Same thing in the general. 3 days before the election, he dumped another $3 million in. So what we're really saying is that he had enough ID going, enough name, but he would not have won. And so we just can't level the playing field when you have billionaires and millionaires deciding to run for office, because they can pretty much buy us out. What I mean by that, they can influence the election with their major wealth. So as we go along fixing the problem, we're fixing the problem for average people like myself and others who have to raise our campaign monies through campaign contributions. And rich guy can take over. But that's just the way it is. If that's what they want to do, that's what they're going to do, because the law provides for that. The Constitution provides for that. And some things we cannot fix. But in terms of Prop 34, I believe we can. I believe we will be able to do that. And the chair, I'm sure, will, if he won't, I will initiate some action in Sacramento to make sure that happens. Because we got good laws here and they should be secure.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, which is the first vote we must cast?
The first vote will be the question of whether to substitute.
So just for everybody's clarification, a vote in favor, a yes vote, will be to substitute Ms. Mystikowski's motion in lieu of the recommendations from committee. Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
6 ayes, 6 noes.
That motion fails. Now what is before us?
You have the communication from the chair of Rules and Elections, which is to sustain the mayor's veto, disapproving the ordinance.
So this is recommendation number 1 in the communication from committee. Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes, 2 noes.
That motion carries. We also have recommendations 2, 3, and 4 in the committee report.
And also, Mr. President, there was a friendly amendment by Mr. Garcetti to recommendation number 2 to add by such a date to allow council action by September 21st.
Now, Mr. Garcetti, you want to maintain it date specific or allow some flexibility if we calculate the number of days a little different to allow some
just a point of clarification, the reason I put September 21st was to give us that flexibility. It gives us another week and a half or so and a few council meetings as a window in case we don't get it.
But for everybody's understanding, the spirit and intent of setting some sort of timeline is that whatever final action the full council takes can be done with time appropriate for it to take effect in the 2003 municipal elections.
Okay, how about then with the intent that such a date would allow, et cetera, et cetera.
Everybody okay with that? Any other questions? Seeing none, then clerk, please open the roll on recommendations 2, 3, and 4 from committee as amended with that wonderful intent. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those recommendations are adopted. Next item.
Item number 30, called special by Councilmember Garcetti.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see we do have staff here. I have a few questions to ask about this. This is, colleagues, we're looking at the redistricting that's going to be upcoming. And I have some questions about, because data is nothing but objective sometimes. We obviously all are well aware of the political ramifications of data collection and data manipulation. I have a few questions to ask of the CLA. Regarding recommendation 1, I'm curious about the other data acquisitions that you've mentioned. In addition to the adjusted numbers, should they become available, will the CLA also acquire demographic data from public entities and private vendors? And if you can hold the balance of my time.
Not necessarily. The census data does have demographic data in it. So, I mean, if the council requested additional information or the commission requested additional information, that could be added to the database. The intent here was to allow the opportunity and indicate the opportunity to add additional data if so requested.
Right, and I anticipate that we probably will want to do that, but sorry, Mr. Deaton, were you
I was
going
going to say we do that in consultation with the city attorney relative to the legality of doing that. I don't.
Okay.
Just that would be my only caveat.
A second question, well, what is the process then of if we do go down that route of further data acquisition? My anticipation is that we probably will need to, because what's provided by the Census Bureau is not enough in terms of looking at all sorts of communities of interest. If we took ethnic communities as just one of them, for instance, it's very political which surname dictionaries you use. Right now there's a whole debate within the data collection community, about whether or not, for instance, in the 13th district, all Filipino names are suddenly going to be counted as Latinos because they have the same last names. So what will the process be in terms of consulting the City Council in those very important matters should we go towards further data acquisition?
The process would be, first off, the commission has the authority over this until, by ordinance, till March 1st. And the commission, either commissioners or their staff or the public, would have to advocate that other sources be used. The staff may choose to do that. Individual commissioners may think that's appropriate, and that'll be a decision within the commission that they'll have to make decisions on, and then in turn make their decisions on their redistricting plan, either with or without that information and using just the census information. When the council and the city gets their plan in March, then we'll go through essentially the same process. Either members of the council, members of the redistricting committee, and or members of the public and or staff could make those recommendations, and the pros and cons of using those different data sources could be debated and discussed.
So do you anticipate that the council and the CLA and the commission will be sharing the same data acquisitions, or is there no mechanism really necessarily in place for that yet?
We're definitely going to stay with the summary file 1 as being the base file, and haven't thought this out, but just reacting would be that it would be difficult for us not to at least take into account any data file that the Commission had used in that process. I do not believe that the Council is limited. For example, if the Commission did not use any of those files, I don't think that their not using them would preclude us from using them.
Right, and certainly we have the option to do that, and I'd recommend that any data that you do acquire, additional data, that it is shared with both the Commission and with us, and that we do the same thing. If we acquire any, et cetera, that really is a pooled resource so that the public can see as transparent a process on that, and the same data sources at least being
right. I would encourage you, if people have that position that there's some other files that they provide that information to our office and also and then we can forward it on to the Commission office, both Commission offices, because we also have two commissions, right? Which is, and it's conceivable that you could have lots of alternatives here. You could have one commission using one set of additional data and then the other commission using other information. I think that
inevitably would happen politically. The access, I guess, is the more important point if one wants to get the other.
Right, and I think that if, for example, one of those commissions used, we would purchase that file or obtain that file with the permission that both commissions and the council could use it. Somehow, at some point, all that has to be reconciled right here.
Okay. And colleagues and CLA, one last thing. In recommendation 4, I would also say that when we have the public hearing, and I think that's a good thing that we're going to be having a public hearing, because we're going to all be receiving a lot of criticisms or people saying, that data should be manipulated one way or the other, that certainly communities of interest aren't being met in one form or another, that we come up with some way for responding to that. And I don't think there's necessarily been in place yet a mechanism for response, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think that will be very important for us too. And it's fine to have all those opinions out there. Legally, it's great for us in some ways, but in terms of making sure that we have some sort of format to respond to the public and not just have it be empty words, I would recommend that we do that too.
Yeah, I think the intent of 4 is that we would somehow come together a common early on that the council and the two commissions hopefully would, I'm not sure where we would meet, but in some large room, and receive all this information simultaneously and somehow have the intent of at least trying to share the same structure of moving forward in a legal sense. Otherwise, the council in March is going to have a difficult time sorting through both the legal issues and now perhaps the data issues. So.
Mr. Reyes.
I've been told that the census data states that Council District 1 lost population. And I'm assuming that data sets, the numbers we're developing will be coming from one baseline study. That's my assumption. Would that be correct?
I don't know if the census data said that CD1 lost population total in a real sense, but in relative sense. In other words, other districts gained more than you did, therefore...
yeah, I think actually it did go down.
Actually, CD1 did go down. I didn't.
So my question becomes, in this commission process, how accessible or how interactive will the council be? Or are we going to wait for the 6 months for them to go through their process and then we look at the information?
Well, I would assume what our intent is to provide the software and the data and the hardware for each office, each commissioner, to be looking at this data from in the next few weeks all the way to July of next year. And I would assume that each council office and each individual interested in this would be sharing their views with the commission and the commissioners, and then also prepare yourself for the discussion in March. So it's both, between now and March, it's an input to the commission, and secondly, then in March is that by that time, having become familiar with various approaches and various plans and the data, that you would be in a position to hopefully make a decision quickly.
So the charter doesn't preclude us from engaging the commission at that level?
No, it just gives it the independence to come together with a plan in accordance with the ordinance the council and the mayor have adopted, which is March 1st. And I would assume that, I would have assumed no less.
Thank you.
Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That item is approved. Before we go on to the next item, let me make two quick announcements. One is, colleagues, we have several closed session items, so you may want to take a seventh inning stretch here. The other is, in the report that we have just adopted relative to the redistricting commissions, the date set forth in the report is today as a deadline for your appointments, or all appointing bodies to submit their appointments to the city clerk. To the extent possible, please do so. If not, then do so as quickly as possible so we can get those procedures in motion. Mr. Deeks?
Very important that they not be any later than the next week or so. And I've been also advised by the city attorney, just for your information, that we will have to adopt, they will have to adopt, and then I imagine the council will act on them as well, conflict of interest codes for the commissioners, so they will be under the, our ethics ordinance as well, since they will be making decisions. So
is that for the council to adopt or for the commission once it begins to meet to adopt?
Each of the commissions will have to adopt a code. The codes will be forwarded to the council for the council's review, and then the council will have to approve it.
Ms. Misikowski.
Oh, I had another matter, actually. I was going to ask for reconsideration on item 11. This was a lien on a piece of property in my district that was deferred. We haven't been able to find a reason for the deferral. Building and Safety is recommending an assessment by way of a supplemental report. So I'd first like to ask for reconsideration.
Colleagues, request to reconsider item number 11. Clerk, please open the roll on reconsideration. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Item 11 is now reconsidered. Ms. Misikowski.
Now I move the report with the supplemental report as submitted by Building and Safety.
So that was the technical amendment to change the assessment amount, if I understand correctly. Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Item 11 is adopted. Next item, please.
Item number 38, called special by Councilmember Garcetti.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I know this has been a long meeting, but it gives me immense pride to rise today to offer this item before you that would begin the path down the establishment of a youth commission here in the city of Los Angeles. When I ran, I'm sure when many of you ran for office, one of the things that we all feel is the disconnect between young people and the government here in Los Angeles. There are many cities, most notably San Francisco, that have moved towards the establishment of youth commissions with youth commissioners. And I think that it would be an extraordinary step forward in a council that had publicly stated it wants to invest in young people and wants to invest in communities for us to have such a youth commission here. And I commend the many wonderful bodies that already deal with youth issues here. The LA Bridges program, obviously the Commission on Children, Youth, and Their Families, the Workforce Investment Board's Youth Council, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. All of these have done some incredibly wonderful things in giving forums for young people to speak and to be part of the process. Now let's elevate them and say that young people should be equal commissioners to those of other commissions that we have here. This item before you instructs that we look at the establishment of a youth commission here in Los Angeles and have a time frame to CLA to present that to us in 60 days. A number of young people who I've spoken to along the way really see this as a step forward. If you go to the City of San Francisco's website and look at their youth commission, you'll see youth task forces being set up. And Unfortunately, when we have commissions such as Children, Youth, and Families that do such incredible work, you find young people saying, well, we don't care about family issues and children's issues. Let us define our own agenda. And one of the most politically powerful moments for me in the last year was during the Democratic National Convention, when I was lucky enough to work with a collective of people that put together a youth convention during the Democratic National Convention. We invited every high school from LAUSD. We had hundreds of students from here locally join hundreds of students from around the country that had been at the Republican National Convention and now at the Democratic National Convention here to be able to say, this is a youth platform. Listen to our voices, and this is the first step forward. So I urge you all to approve this. This will be coming back to us in 60 days, and I think it is an exciting, dynamic step forward in empowering the young people of our city. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Wax.
I share Mr. Garcetti's views and congratulate him, but want to really raise not a caveat so much as a caution. As necessary as this is and as welcome, it can never be seen, and sometimes that becomes the problem, as, okay, so youth issues, the youth perspective goes to the Youth Commission and that's it. One of the things that was exciting today about a 27-year-old person on the Police Commission was that 27-year-olds have sometimes different perspectives on police matters, and teenagers do, than perhaps grandparents do and all. And we really need young people on all the commissions. If this is a training ground, if this is a way of highlighting, all of the things that this commission can do is great, but it can't be seen as a substitute where, okay, that's taking care of the youth problem, because youth voices need to be in the neighborhood councils. We have to insist upon that. Certainly on, we're dealing with things like education, housing, youth really need to be reflected much more on all the commissions. How can you have a Recreation and Parks Commission without having youth on a recreation? Who's it for? How can you have a Library Commission without youth having? So while we do this, and this is welcome, and I want it, maybe the very first thing this commission can do, and we in its place until then, is say we want youth represented on all of the commissions. And I thought today was important from that standpoint. Some people may not think 27 is young, but when you're my age, 27 is really young. But there's no reason why younger people can't be on commissions as well, and in fact there are very good reasons why they should be. And so I only don't want this to be seen as the pigeonhole where the youth get over there and then you don't need to consider them for everything else, that this be seen as over and above that or on top of that or somehow in tandem with that, but as a step, a major step forward to having youth voices reflected wherever decisions are made in local government.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. I rise in support. What a great idea. Wish I'd thought of it. But I think those commissioners ought to come to the Education and Neighborhood Committee to be confirmed. I think it's a great idea, and I share Councilman Wax's concerns as I do, that I am frustrated that some of the things we are beginning to create in Los Angeles, such as neighborhood councils, seem to, at this point, still not be, they're not attracting the young people. And I agree, I was one of those that felt like all of our commissions should have the voice of youth on them. So I agree. I think one of the things this commission can do is whether or not each commission in the city it has a young person on it. I think this commission should definitely weigh in on all the decisions that the other commissions are making, and maybe we have a way that they really can have that input, like you said, on libraries, on rec and parks, on there's just every commission in the city. I think it's important that this commission is involved. So I rise in support. It's a great idea. It's the time for that in this city.
Mr. Reyes.
Council President, members, I rise to congratulate Eric for such a, Mr. Garcetti, council member, for this motion. In the next couple of years, we're going to have about 72 acres of land, I hope, converted from industrial wasteland into open space parkland. In the midst of all this, I'm having intense gang wars going on right now. I have killings going on, child abuse. And what I find is our alienation from our young people, in that we see them as us and them. When you look at the faces, these are young, very young people from 9, 10 to 13, 14 years old. And there's a notion of respect within that culture. And that respect comes from how we treat them as individuals. And I hate to use the word them because it's us. So hopefully this commission gives an angle, an approach that can bring that dignity, that respect, that communication that we need to have with our young people. We have alienated them to the point where now there's a whole subculture, there's a whole sub-economy with the drug dealing and the gang running, gun running, I should say, within our own neighborhoods, and we have failed to penetrate it. So again, I'm not saying this will be the cure-all, but it's one more tool, coupled with land use decisions, open space, active recreation, swimming pools, and areas where there aren't any. We can start reaching the young folks that continue to fall through the cracks, and hopefully this is one of those vehicles. Thank you.
Young Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Dad. Eric, I support this, and from your previous profession as a teacher, knowing the apathy within the community, apathy with our youth, I think it's just an inspiring process for them to bring them on board. I think we might find more skate parks instead of golf courses, more recreational opportunities for the youth. I know there's one in my district, and it was established recently. We have a concern because of the drugs, the gangs, the police resources addressed for the youth who get involved in activities because they're oftentimes not a positive activity. I think it's a wonderful idea. I look at this as responsive government, accessible government, government that's going to reach out and bring in a focus that many of us old folks like Councilman Wax, much older than me, by the way, don't understand the concerns that they have, the interests that they have, and the goals that they have. So I commend you on that and strongly supportive of this, and congratulations.
Mr. Garcetti.
I'm going to move the question, but just a quick couple points and a thank you. I think what you bring up, Councilmember Wax, is spot on, and we have to make sure it's the same thing with women on commissions. The Women's Commission should not supplant women on all commissions, and I hope that this sends that message that this is not a place certainly to pigeonhole youth issues and take them away. The second thing is that if we want to have really young people on the commission, we need a charter change as well, because there's an age limit of 18 years old. I think we should lower that to 16 years. There are articulate, young, forceful leaders right now who have led walkouts, whether it's Chicano walkouts or against Proposition 187 or Belmont right now. They are the ones who lead, and then we follow. And we need to recognize that people under the age of 18 can be and are leaders already in our community. And just my last thanks is a thank you to Council President Padilla for being such a strong supporter of this, and without your leadership, this would not be possible. Thank you.
Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That item is approved. Next item.
Item number 44, called special by Councilmember Reyes.
Item 44, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you. My questions were answered, and I'd like to withdraw.
Okay. Item 44 is now before us. Any other members wishing to speak?
Mr. President, there is an urgency clause in that ordinance that requires 12 votes, and only 11 council members are present. Do you wish to hold this to Friday?
Or let's hold that on the desk. We expect Mr. Holden to return, I understand. So we'll hold it on the desk for a possible vote later in the meeting. Next item.
Excuse me, Mr. President, you have a special one. It's an item not on the agenda. It's a motion presented by Councilmember Misikowski and seconded by Councilmember Pacheco. The city attorney will explain the need for the findings.
The findings, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has to do with a grant to the Los Angeles Fire Department from FEMA. The money needs to be transferred to be used for a storage facility, and it was just discovered the other day by the fire department that this was not included. FEMA doesn't have a problem with using it for this money, and it needs to be paid by the 31st of this month. So therefore, the council needs to make the findings that the need to act arose after the posting of the agenda, and there's an immediate need to act.
Anybody wishing to speak on the findings? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll on the findings. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Special one is now before us. Anybody wishing to speak on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That motion is approved. Next item.
This is the time for comments from the public on non-agenda items under the council's jurisdiction.
Colleagues, this is a public comment period for today's meeting. The council calls forward Michael Rubin to be followed by Chris Schabel.
Mr. Chairman and council members, thank you very much for your time. I have two comments which I'd like to make, and excuse me if I'm a little nervous, but I'm not used to working in a public forum like this, so I'll give it my best. My first comment is the governor recently, concerned about the energy crisis, has recommended cash incentives for businesses that save energy by painting their rooftops, painting the rooftops white. My request is that the city join the governor in promoting this type of program and any other program that will provide for practical energy savings. I think that painting the rooftop white will, similar to the Alice in Wonderland theory, it will reduce the energy consumption. My other comment is I just wanted to make a quick comment, if I could, Mr. Chairman and council members, on your recent discussion, which is concerning when candidates running in special elections may begin accepting contributions. And my question is, why is it that I find people who approach me on the street and request for spare change or whatever, they never concern themselves as to when they should start accepting contributions. So that's just a general question, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And there's no matching funds for them either. Chris Schabel. Going once, going twice. This concludes the public comment period for today's meeting. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Mr. President, could I just, if Mr. Rubin is still here, just as a point of personal privilege, I've been trying for 14 years to get the city to adopt the White Roofs program, and I'm really thrilled that you came down here and suggested it as well. We'll try again.
Thank you, Ms. Galanter. Mr. Weiss for an announcement.
President, I'd like to announce that the Budget and Finance Committee will meet at 2:30 this afternoon, rather than 2 o'clock.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Mr. President, there are 12 members present now. Do you wish to take up item number 44?
Yes, please. Thank you to Mr. Holden for returning to chambers. Ms. Sikowski, did you wish to speak? Let's clear there we go. Clear the queue. Madam Clerk, please open the roll on item number 44. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That item is approved. Next item, please.
Do you wish to clear the desk, Mr. President, before going into closed session?
Let's clear the desk.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those motions are posted and referred.
There is an excuse on the desk. Councilmember Brinson requests to be excused city business Friday, September 7th to arrive late, and Wednesday, September 5th to leave at 10:15 for personal business, and those both meet council policy.
Mr. Brinson is excused.
That clears the desk for closed session.
This is the point in time in the meeting where the council will adjourn into closed session in conformance with California Code. Guards, please clear the chambers. Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11.
That item is approved as well. Next item.
Item 42E, in the case of Rita Gross versus City of Los Angeles, settlement in the amount of $165,000.
Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That item is approved. Next item.
And 42F, settlement in the case of Darrell Townsend versus City of Los Angeles in the amount of $145,000.
Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That item is approved.
That clears the desk, Mr. President.
Any adjourning motions? Please stand. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for Council Member Hal Burnson, who could not be here. Colleagues ask that we adjourn memory of Theodore Ted Monkarsh, a strong, vibrant, and inspiring man, 88 years of age, who a couple of years ago became a victim of Alzheimer's disease and a friend of Elaine Pfefferman in CD12 office. He's a resident of Council District 12, passed away on August 6th of this year, and is survived by his wife Ann, brother Max, sister Molly Goodman, and various other family members. Thank you.
Mr. Holden.
President, members, I ask that we adjourn in memory of Ms. Alberta Rocket. She was only 49 years old at the time of her death. Ms. Rocket was the director of the Foster Grandparent Program for Volunteers of America. So she was out there working for all of us across the country. Service will be held August 18th, 2000 at Trinity Baptist Church, 2040 West Jefferson Boulevard, 11 a.m., survived by 3 young children and a husband.
Any others? Mr. Wax.
I'd like the council to adjourn in the memory of my sister-in-law's father, Jack Weiner. He was a pretty remarkable man. He and his wife, Rose, of 71 years, after a long history of being involved in the Jewish community and many philanthropic endeavors, went to the Jewish Home for the Aged, where they were recently interviewed on several CNN programs on aging. Dennis McCarthy did an article in the Daily News. They're an amazing couple. They lived together for 71 years, and he passed yesterday and leaves his wife, who's still there, and my sister-in-law, Myrna Wax, and her sister, Carolyn Block, and I'll give the clerk the pertinent information.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.